The north wind blows, and with it, marches death. Dragonborn Courier. Summary. Eddard Stark swore that he'd never allow his family to be destroyed again. After the rebellion, the north has been closed off, working towards making it strong once more. That is until the king comes a-calling for him to serve as his hand. Eddard, and his family, must be smart enough to survive, but will they recognize themselves by the end of it? I have replaced Jon Snow with a true-born second son of Eddard. This is a North-centric story. Never read Asoyaf, I know, I suck, so this is off what I know from show what other stuff I know from the fandom. Notes. I know what y'all are thinking. They are publishing another story without finishing any of their previous. What can I say, I am shitty at time management. Have fun reading this little entry chapter. See the end of the work for more notes. Chapter 1, A Promise Made. Chapter Text. Eddard. Eddard had been raised as the spare for his entire childhood. As such, when the pressures of ruling the largest kingdom in Westeros fell on his shoulders, he pledged he would never do that to any of his children. As such, when his second son and child, Edwyl, was born, he promised him in his cot that he would raise him alongside Robb and would never separate them. He made that promise over a decade ago, and since then, he has followed that to the letter. Currently, Eddard was standing on a balcony looking over the tiltyard, observing his two eldest as they sparred against one another. Robb excelled in horsemanship and lancing, but Edwyl's skill with a blade almost always beat out his elder brother. The only times when the younger would lose was when Robb employed some trick. Eddard silently scolded Edwyl every time he became upset when that happened. Good thing Sir Rodrik was quick to point out that on the field of battle, those who employed tricks, were those who got to travel back to their families. Ned. At the sound of his name, he turned to gaze upon his beautiful wife. Cat. He hugged her, then held her torso. How are the youngsters? Sansa has been scolding Arya over her stitching over the last hour. I had to leave before my head would explode. Eddard smiled at that. Bran is, I'm sure, off climbing somewhere despite what we have both told him, and Rickon is being tended to by the nurse. Good, that is good. Catelyn took the time to peer down into the tiltyard. You are aware of how much Arya wishes to join? Yes, I am. And when she and Sansa come of age, they will join their brothers. Cat simply sighed before breaking herself away from him and turned to leave. Me lord. Eddard held back a sigh himself. Since he returned from the rebellion, he had told himself that all his children would be trained, that none would ever be taken advantage of. The only obstacle was his southern wife. He loved her dearly and respected as many of her customs as he could, including building a small September in Winterfell. But she continued to try and resist him in this matter. How could you think that, Ned? She had shouted at him when he first brought it up. They are ladies and will not pick up steel, it's barbaric. No lord would ever take them for a wife. He had been quick to respond. No southern lord would take them as a wife. They had many arguments since then, and he explained how their own marriage, even though the first marriage with a southerner in generations, had still nearly sent some houses into near revolt. For both himself, and the future of his house, both their daughters and their eldest son must marry in the north, or not marry at all. Chapter 2, The Art of War, and of Rearing. Summary. The boys learn of war, and later, of the more civilized aspects of ruling. Notes. Back at it again so soon. Chapter Text. Sir Rodrik Castle. Why would you do that? Sir Rodrik questioned Edwyl Stark. The two Stark boys had left their finance lessons with the Maester and were now going through some hypothetical battle maneuvers. Sending in the cavalry would be the only way to dislodge the enemy, sir. Our heavy or light foot would be out of the question, and as for our archers, we would not enough of them to make a substantial difference. And even in the muddy ground, you'd still send them in. Admittedly, that could cause problems, but simple momentum from a great wave of armored horse could still break their formation. Sir Rodrik just stared at Edwyl before he turned his attention to the other brother. Lord Robb, have you anything to say? Despite not being as good with a sword as his younger brother, usually, both brothers had a mind for the field of battle. Why attack at all? Sorry. Both Edwyl and Rodrik responded. Why attack at all? I mean, in this example, The terrain is bad, and the enemy outnumbers us. If it was me, I'd say retreat to a more defensible position, a hill or hold fast, and let them come to me. That, or cause panic amongst the enemy and use pincer tactics to divide them. Where'd you learn that, brother? When I was reading about Walton Free Stark, during the second hammering of the Riverlands. The book is actually very interesting, ask Mayor Stillowin about it. Sir Roderick decided to cut in. You have the right of it, Rob. Both brothers looked at him at that. In reality, in a battle like this, even the most hardened Northmen would tell their lord to fight another day. But this was done to see what you would do if you had to. So get those good ideas of yours out of your head and answer as if you had to fight this day. Rob sat silently, thinking on what to do. Finally, he answered. Assuming enemy waits for our move, I'd actually move our archers up first. I'd place them first in line. I would order them to fire continuously into the enemy. I would order our foot and horse to remain where they are. Eventually, the enemy will have to attack to silence the archers or risk being totally annihilated. Once the enemy either uses their own archers or sends their own forces, I would order ours to retreat and have our heavy foot assume defensive stances. As the enemy forces rush down, I would order our horse to split into two groups, each going to flank the side of the attacking enemy force. Aye, lad, that is a good plan. Force them to attack us, then kneecap them with our own horse. Both of the brothers looked pleased with themselves. But Sir Roderick held up a finger. Remember, no plan is infallible, and often is forgotten as soon as contact is made. Always have more than one plan. Yes, sir. Yes, Sir Roderick. Now, one last test. We went over this the other day, but it is important to remember it. How many men can Winterfell raise alone, without the support of the rest of the North? Edwyle answered. 9,000, 12 if all men are called that can be. Good. How many men can the North raise in total? Rob took the initiative this time. 40,000. The largest portions would be from houses Carstark, Umber, Bolton, Dustin, and Ryswell. What about House Marndale? Sir Roderick questioned further. House Marndale, while large, is responsible more for our naval forces. Right. Now, in any war, who would be our biggest challengers? Forget current alliances and think about the entire realm now. Both boys took some time to think before Edwyle answered first. Probably either the Knights of the Vale, or the Lannisters. The Vale because like us, they constantly live in a hostile land, so they have had to learn to become hardy men. I would say that if a Northman were to fight a man from every single kingdom in the realm, their fight with a Valyman would be the only one I'd be concerned for. As for the Lannisters, that is more because of their current discipline under the Lion Lord. After he passes, however, most likely they will no longer have such an elite force. Sir Roderick nodded happily. His lord was teaching his heirs all about the history and politics of the South they needed. Good. Now, unless you have any questions, I believe it is now time to learn from your Lord Father. Both brothers grinned and ran away, happy to join their father for lordly lessons. As the two boys left his in the armory, he elected to work on some paperwork for now. Despite being only the master-at-arms for Winterfell, Lord Stark had entrusted him with the duties of being basically the unofficial warden of the North. Ever since the North began to rebuild its navy and raise its crop yield, he ordered his vassals to send constant reports of their potential host size to the Winterfell Guard. Looking at some parchment, he read the list. House Bolton 2000 heavy foot /1000 light foot. House Sewin 500 light foot /1000 horse. House Dustin 500 heavy foot /500 horse. House Flint, Widow's Watch, 1000 light foot /500 horse. House Forrester 500 light foot. House Glover 1000 light foot. House Hornwood 500 light foot. House Carstark 3000 heavy foot /500 horse. House Locke 1000 heavy foot /500 horse /5 war galleys. House Marndale 1000 heavy foot /1500 horse /30 war galleys. House Mormont 1500 light foot /500 heavy foot /10 war galleys. House Nuri 500 berserkers. House Reed 1000 light foot. House Ryswell 3000 horse. House Tall Heart 500, Lightfoot /500, horse. House Umber 5000 Heavy Foot. House Whitehill 500, Lightfoot /500, horse. House Val 500, Berserkus. House Stark 7000 Heavy Foot /3000 horse. Total, 29,000 of both heavy and light foot. 11,500 horse troops. 45 war galleys, 35 on the east coast, 10 on the western coast. Heavy foot were the infantry equipped with a solid plate chest plate, with mail and thick leather for everything else. Armed with a halberd or a poleaxe along with a sword for close engagements. Light foot were all leather and heavy wool. Used primarily for scouting, archers, guardsmen, and other work. Sir Roderick nodded happily at the numbers. There were of course many more houses in the north, but this was a list of the normal host raised when going to war. If needed, the north could call on nearly 60,000 troops, but could only sustain this for a very short time. Time to have some lunch. Roderick thought to himself. Edwile. Father, may I ask a question? Edwile's lord father turned to look at him. He had finished his lessons and had dismissed both him and Rob. Of course, my son. Come and sit, your mind is heavy with concern. Father, what will I be when I grow? I know that I am the spare, but with you and mother already looking for a betrothed for Rob, soon, I will become useless. I can only think of the night's watch, and I would not like to go. One of Ed's closest secrets was his dislike for the night's watch. If word got out that the second son of the Lord Paramount of the North did not like the watch, it could spell political disaster for both him and his house. He had nothing against the watch personally. In fact, he considered the people who served to be the bravest of people, but for what? It has become weakened, and a man would simply waste away up there. His father looked at him for a moment before a small, almost undetectable smirk crossed his lips. That shocked Edwile. His lord father was famous, not just in the north, but known throughout the entire realm as a cold, unmoving man. He responded then. My son, I have an answer, unfortunately, it must wait until your name-a-day. Why, father? The unknown is killing me. Ed pleaded. Eddard put his hand up for silence. That is all I'll say on the matter, Edwile. But I beg of you to wait, for I believe that you will not be upset about it. Having little choice, Ed agreed. Good. His father responded. You're dismissed. Go, have fun. The rest of the day is yours. The sun shall be setting within the hour, I believe, however. Edwile understood the message. Don't be late for dinner, young man, or you'll answer to your mother. Rob. No doubt after father's lesson Ed got the rest of the day to do as he wished. Unfortunately, as the heir, he had an additional duty. His father told him that his mother had news for him. It is because of this that he found himself walking through the castle, on his way to his Rooken's room, the most likely place for his mother. Turning down the family wing, he already heard the chaos that his youngest brother was causing. Opening the door, he saw young Rooken playing happily in the bath, much to consternation of two nurses and his mother. Mother. Turning to the voice, his mother's cool blue eyes found his. Her tired face took a small smile. Ah, my dear son. She had the look of someone who already knew why he was here. Turning to the two nurses, she gave them some minor orders and then gathered her coat to join him. Come Rob, join me for a walk. Of course, mother. And walk they did. They enjoyed comfortable silence as they slow walked throughout the castle, along some of the walls, and next to the Godswood. Finally, Caitlin Stark broke the quiet. My son, have you given any thought to your betrothed? Rob was silent for a moment before he responded. Well, that was like a dirge from the dark. Lady Stark gave a chuckle. I always assumed that you and father would organize it for me. Well, you'd be partially right. But we would give you tentative final approval. I bring this up because your father and I have narrowed down some candidates for you. Would you like to hear them? Sighing deeply, he nodded. Might as well. Our list as of current is Alis Karstark, daughter of Lord Ricard Karstark. Next is Lara Umber, daughter of Lord John Umber. I refuse to call him that silly name. It was Rob's turn to chuckle at his mother. Next is potentially Daisy Mormont, but she is older than you, more than usual. Next is Wyla Mondaly. I must say, mother, with you, I expected some more southern options. He regretted his comment instantly. He was unaware of the conflict betwixt his parents. Rob, just pick one of the names. With that, his mother walked off back to the castle, leaving a confused Robb Stark behind. Chapter 3, My Brother's Keeper. Notes. I am trying to stick to the original birthdays for each character, but I have changed a few slightly. These are the current age relative to this chapter, occurring in 295 AC. 283 AC, Robb, 12 years old. 284 AC, Edwyl, 11 years old. 286 AC, Sansa, 9 years old. 289 AC, Arya, 6 years old. 290 AC, Brandon, 5 years old. 294 AC, Rickon, newborn. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 295 AC. Eddard. I, Eddard, of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell, Lord Paramount and Warden of the North, do hereby sentence you to death for desertion from the Night's Watch. Have you any words? Speak them now, or may you forever keep them. Eddard grumbled, not ungraciously, to the deserter. Oh, let's get this over with now. I've had enough of your bloody cold cunts up here. The deserter spoke flippantly. Eddard sighed internally. Blasted Southerners. No doubt this man wished to run away for women, money, or some other bloody reason. But he was still a man. He quickly mumbled a quick prayer to the old gods, both to bless a quick strike, but also to allow the man a restful afterlife, whatever that was like. In the short time it took to step his right foot back to raise ice over him in a swinging motion, he made note of his two eldest's gazes. Good, do not look away. Soon this will be you, sooner than you realize. In one swift motion, Eddard took the head of the deserter. Not a sound was heard, true to the legend of his house's blade, even when striking, it was quiet, deathly so. He always thought of it as a sort of finality. Of course it bloody was, it is a sword. But there was something special about ice. It ended lives of course, but there was an added sense of ending. As if it not only killed, but also killed the soul of men too. There was nothing left but a husk of whoever stood and fell for it. Edwyl. Neither he nor Robb looked away. Both would fight till the grave, that it was because they were unafraid, that this was nothing but duty, that it was required of them. But, there was something more to it, Edwyl thought. He took a moment before it came to him. Fear of father knowing that we couldn't watch. Fear that we'd let down the great Eddard Stark. He suspected that his elder brother secretly thought the same thing, not that they'd discuss it of course, after all, they had a reputation to maintain as Northerners. According to father, Robb had more of the wolf's blood than Ed, but even still, Robb was still the silent statue if need be. True, he may have been more outgoing and perhaps he was quick to laugh, but he had also seen his brother slip into a mask of a silent, cold, deadly lordling. It wasn't perfect, far from it actually, Edwyl amusingly thought. But he is trying, and he'll get it soon enough. After all, there was a time when Robb couldn't do it and now he had progressed greatly. That was perhaps the only thing that he knew Robb was jealous of. As Ed was more like father than him, Edwyl had always been able to easily slip into the mask of coldness. It felt like a second skin to him. Not in a negative way, but more as a comfortable retreat. It helped him maintain his composure. Just as the Lord's face was used to show others that you were in control, it allowed it to convince himself as well. Whenever he would become angry or frustrated, he would never allow anyone to see it, he would always fall back to the cold veneer of a Northerner and would command it remain within until it eventually dispelled like a dying blizzard. Looking over to Robb, he noticed as he was readying his horse that he had an aura of unease. Brother. Edwyl spoke. Robb's head snapped about, as if he was caught up in a dream and had just awoken. Ed. What is it? Are you well? You seem distant. Robb. At first, Robb thought of lying and saying he was fine. After all, if any other person heard what he was stewing over, they'd probably laugh at it. But Edwyl was different. He was the closest thing to Eddard Stark reborn if that was possible. Rob's Lord Father was the only one who could bring out the truth in most people, especially Arya if he had caught her doing something. But then Edwyl began to mimic it. Soon, Ed was able to bring out the truth from Arya. A small girl perhaps, but a victory, nonetheless. Him and blasted father. But he'd never mention it. Finally, he noticed Ed still staring at him. He hadn't spoken since his question. That damnable, silent gaze. Rob realized that Ed would only see the truth, and he eventually resigned himself to confessing his worry. Mother and I discussed my marriage. He spoke quietly, but evenly, not an ounce of inflection. She gave me a list and commanded me to pick one. His voice grew softer. I just thought I'd have longer. You know. He expected Ed to laugh, or at the very least smile in amusement, but he did neither. Instead, he audibly sighed and let the flap of a leather pouch fall closed on his mount. Not making eye contact, Ed slowly walked away from the group until he stood about 10 paces away from the rest. Rob at this point could only see his back and left side. Oh, what the hell? Rob sighed frustratingly. Leaving his own mount, he walked to his brother and stood to his left. Instead of looking out, he examined his brother. Ed was staring at the distant mountains as if they held all the answers. Damn, he looks more like father now than ever. Rob realized with a near jolt. Before he could say anything, his Lord Father walked his own mount with his riders up to Ed's right. Sons, why are you not mounted? We are leaving, let us leave this place for a warm hearth. Rob was silent, not sure what they were doing, but thankfully, Ed responded. Father, words must be shared amongst brothers, in the land of our ancestors, not within the confines of a keep. If it pleases you, leave some guards to stay with us. Edwyl responded calmly. Eddard looked at his son with a piercing gaze, as if reading Ed's very soul, before he soon nodded and allowed the very corner tip of his mouth to raise. Those who did not know Eddard Stark would say nothing changed, but to his sons, he had just shown approval. If only I could get more of those looks. Rob thought. He wasn't jealous of them, but it would be nice. Very well. The Lord Stark turned to the men behind him. Kaysen, Jonel, Gaerim, Guston, stay here and escort my sons back to Winterfell. Regardless of their orders, I expect them back before the sun reaches the horizon. Edwyl. No worries, this will be but a moment. After the 4 men responded in the affirmative, Eddard Stark snapped his reins and his horse took off, with the rest of his men following. As the 4 guards began to dismount from their horse, he stopped them. No need, men. This should be quick. If you find it acceptable, please stay some paces back so as to not overhear us but remain close enough to keep watch over us. Although none would expect it, it was not unheard of for an ambitious second son to have their elder brother meet an unfortunate accident so as to advance themselves. This was not even close to the case, but the guards were relieved when their lord's son insisted they remain within watching distance. But now was the time to address his brother. Slowly, he turned to his left. Rob. Ed tore his gaze away from the land in front of them, so slowly that you'd expect him to be in a trance. Then Ed's gaze finally met his. It was an intense stare, so intense that it would intimidate even the most hardened of veterans. If he was honest with himself, Rob too was a little intimidated, but for all the worry about his own adequateness, he would never allow his younger brother to scare him. Finally, Edwyl spoke. I imagine others would have laughed at you. Oh, how great you are at observation, brother. You are truly a master. Rob responded, a combination of sarcasm and mild annoyance. Ed put his hand in his shoulder. I am disheartened to see that you thought I would do the same. Before you speak, I know you never said it, but I can see it in your eyes. Damn, he really is father. I have to get better at that. Edwyl continued. Your heart is heavy with worry. It is laden with self-doubt. Oh, and when did you become a paragon of wisdom? Ed smirked at that, looking much more like himself, the young man that he was, before he once again assumed what Rob called father's face. I can only imagine what you are thinking now. I just wish you, nay I demand of you, to know that I am always here. You will not find a more ardent supporter of you than me. In a way, I envy that you are going through this, if only to comfort me when I go through it. Please, you aren't the heir, You have a much broader decision than I do. Yes, father and mother made that quite clear to me. But I still will not follow it. After all, father himself was not the heir either. I know our parents wish for the children to find as much happiness as they can, but am I to do that at the expense of the North? Now Rob was surprised at this turn. Edwyle had started by comforting him, now Ed was confessing his own fears. I will marry for the good of the North, I would not have it any other way, I would refuse to. Perhaps it would even be to a southern house so that we may have some small alliances, no matter how insignificant. That is, quite the mature thought, brother. Other children would jump at the thought of their own control. Yes, they would. But that is what separates us from them. We are Northerners, Rob. Edwyle was a staunch supporter of the old gods. Rob, though not against them, was usually indifferent to them, and sometimes heard saying things from the Seven. Suddenly, Edwyle used his left hand to grab his neck and pulled him in. Remember, we are of the North. We cannot afford the flights of fancy that the South does. When winter comes, the first thing we must forsake is honor, the last, our lives. But what about father's teachings? Eddard Stark, for however cold he was a man of undisputed honor. Most throughout the entire realm considered him the ideal of honor. But tell me, do you think our ancestors won the North from the Horse Kings, the Red Kings, the Giant Kings and so many others because of honor? No, we won it because we were willing to do anything for the North. Oh, do not look at me like that, I'm not saying till kill innocents for the gods' sake, but when there is a choice between honor and intelligence, we must choose the intelligent move. Ed whispered, but with great strength. You speak as if you have seen countless winters. Finally, his brother broke from his facade and laughed heartedly. Perhaps I have read too much of our history. At this, both brothers turned and strode back to their mounts. Edwyle, mounting his horse, he watched as Rob did the same before turning to their escorts. Men, come, let us return with haste. Soon their group began to slowly trot. Before they got too fast, he turned to his brother and spoke. Remember, Rob, forsake honor first, and our lives last. Rob returned his gaze with newfound strength. Rob would always follow honor to a certain degree, but Ed hoped that he would not be blinded by it. Notes. I am aware that the ages of the two eldest still seem young to us. But remember, in the medieval setting this is in, by the time men reached the age of 15 or 16, they were considered full adults, so such conversations between ages just a tad younger are not fantastical. Chapter 4, The Cubs Learn to Walk. Notes. Asterisk, please readers understand that before I started writing this, I planned family trees for all the great houses that continue for generations much further than even Asoyaf do. As in 400 years into the future, they are very extensive, if I may say so myself. Thank you all for what you wish to happen in this story and what you think to expect, but please understand, I am already aware of who everyone is going to marry. I know how many and what children they will sire, I know what they will do too. Thank you for understanding. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 296 AC. Rob, we've received a raven from Mage Mormont a week ago. Your mother and I have elected to wait until now to share the news. Rob stood in the solar of his Lord Father. He had been called from the sparring yard by a guard who had summoned him. Rob, some time ago, had elected to choose Daisy Mormont as his betrothed. She was older than him, sure, as well as the heir to her own house, but Rob, having spent more time in the library with Edwyle, soon recognized that House Mormont had been one of, if not the most loyal vassal of House Stark. They had been looked over for many generations as politically and militarily, they did not have much to offer. But Rob decided it was high time to reward good service. House Karstark and House Umber were good and loyal, but being awarded too much was just as large a disadvantage as well, growing soft. House Marndaly was the only other house he seriously considered. However, when it came down to it, House Marndaly was another near devoutly loyal house. At that point, it just came to who was more preferable to Rob. Rob had remembered the dark-haired bear woman when she came with her mother for the harvest festival some years back. He turned his attention back to his father. What was her response? Did she accept? Eddard Stark, instead of answering immediately, instead took a moment, and not in a good way. I am afraid that, though she is not opposed to it, she has to take some dynastic precautions. What does that mean? Rob was confused. Marriage to House Stark was near royalty within the north. His father sighed. Rob, you are in the unique position of being the heir to the largest kingdom within the realm. To you it may seem simple, but, to a house as small as House Mormont, marriage to House Stark may not only cause feelings of disenfranchisement among the more powerful lords, but also make the smaller houses more ambitious themselves. Rob realized it then. Lady Mormont was actually thinking not only of her house and the problems it could face, but also to House Stark itself. House Mormont knows no king, but the king in the north whose name is Stark. Rob remembered reading the history of Robert's rebellion, how House Mormont under Jeor Mormont refused to bend the knee to Robert I Baratheon after the end of the war. It nearly caused another war after, but apparently Jon Arryn, the newly appointed hand of the king, managed to calm everyone down. Citing that since the Mormonts had sworn service to House Stark, and since Eddard Stark swore to Robert, there was no real incident. Rob, tired of the politics, however foolish it was, simply declared, I care not. I have chosen Daisy Mormont, to hell with the ramifications. I shall deal with them as every Stark has dealt with problems, with the loyal behind me, and the traitorous before me. His lord father coolly regarded him for some moments. Finally, he made a face of respect. Very well. I shall respond to Lady Mormont that House Stark does not care and looks forward to the next Lady of Winterfell to have been raised by bears. Ned Stark humorously noted. Many thanks, father. May I return to my studies? His father nodded once. Go, my son. Learn from Sir Roderick, learn from Maester Lewyn, and learn from your brother especially. His father now looked directly into his eyes. Edwyle will be your greatest ally, Rob. Recognize that he is smarter than you, use it, learn from it, and never forget it. Rob would have felt anger over such a declaration from his father, but he had matured since that pitiful era. Of course, father. That reminded him. It would be Edwyle's name-a-day in the coming weeks. Have you any ideas for a gift for him? I am at my wit's end for ideas. Eddard Stark thought for a moment before he responded. Perhaps a story of some kind. Ed loves to read and learn. It might be difficult, but find a book within the library that he has not seen or read yet. Have Lewyn assist you, he often helps Edwyle. I had not thought of that, father, many thanks. 296 AC. Edwyle. Happy name-a-day, Ed. Edwyle heard this only a second before the fiery ball of energy that was his youngest sister jumped onto his bed. Happy name-a-day. Get up, let's have fun. Edwyle was turning 12. He was soon to be grown. Thankfully he had longer to wait to be married than his brother. He had learned that House Mormont had accepted the marriage proposal. Today, he just looked forward to enjoying his day. Normally, by his father's command, every day started with a light breakfast, followed by 3 to 4 hours of practicing in the tilt yard. Washing up and having a light lunch before going to study with Rob and their father about lordly duties. After another 2 to 3 hours, they were to spend 1 or 2 more hours with Maester Lewyn in the library, learning history and the cultures of the realm and beyond. Afterward, dinner would be held in the family hall, at which point the young children went to bed and the older ones were given the last hour or two to do as they saw fit. However, at the request of his lady mother, his father had allowed every child the day off on their name-a-day. Whether this was used to go hunting, or to spend it in winter town shopping, or doing other activities that their parents did not know. Edwyle wasn't sure what he wanted to do. Quite honestly, spending time with Rob in the library sounded perfect, but perhaps a nice ride through the country, an hour or two, also sounded nice. Get off of me, Arya! Edwyle shouted, though not unkindly. Leave, I must ready myself for the day. Arya pouted but quickly left and allowed him to change from his evening wear to his day wear. Edwyle, much like Rob, usually wore light leathers and a small, shoulder cape of wolf's fur. If they were sparring, he would wear thicker leather, and once he and Rob had graduated to live steel, to the plate armor provided by the Winterfell Guard. Leaving his room, he found Arya waiting right at the end of the hall for him. Come sister, let us walk together to break our fast. Rob. Edwyle walked in with Arya in tow. His father and mother were already seated. He was to the left of his father while their mother was busy trying to feed young, baby Rukun his morning meal. "Son, happy Namaday," his lord father announced when he saw him. At this point, Caitlin Stark looked up and smiled at her second son. Soon, a small chorus of celebratory congratulations could be heard, mostly from Bran and Sansa. Taking his seat with poise, Edwyl thanked everyone for the well wishes. "Ed, what are your plans for today?" Robb questioned. "I was actually wondering if you wanted to join me for a short ride around Winterfell today." Before anyone could respond, Arya jumped in. Can I come? Please?" She turned her attention to their father. "Father, can I go? Please say I can go too." Their mother frowned at her. "Now Arya, remember your manners. First ask your brother if he allows it, then ask your father." The rest of the day was agreed upon. He joined Edwyl for a ride around the close lands of Winterfell. They had guards accompany them as well as Arya, the little Spitfire. After returning to the castle, they once again rode out armed with equipment to hunt. They had left Arya and switched their guardsmen with some hunters of the guard. Robb humorously thought back to the day years ago when he had been taught by Sir Roderick of all the groups within the Winter Guard. There were the household Winterfell guards, made up of mostly heavy foot, as well as a horse detachment. The hunters, however, he quickly learned were not hunters in the same way others were. Hunters of the guard were the elite of the elite, founded by his lord father after returning from Robert's rebellion. Hunters were trained with both sword and bow by the masters at Winterfell. After this, they were sent to the Neck, to be trained by the Crannog men in hunting, tracking, healing, poisoning, and stealth. Thought a relatively new unit, hunters soon made a name for themselves, ruthlessly hunting down bandits and evildoers. Their loyalty to House Stark is said to be bound like iron, though admittedly, their loyalty has yet to be truly tested. Regardless, Robb had an enjoyable time. Together with Ed and 3 hunters, 2 of the hunters made camps while the third and the 2 brothers went off to hunt. Much to Robb's chagrin, he was the worst bowman out of the 3 of them. He understood the hunter, but he was minorly annoyed that Ed was surprisingly good. Is there one thing that he isn't good at? However, despite their marksmanship, they succeeded only in catching 2 small hares. After eating the light lunch and enjoying time with the hunters, getting to know all of them. Despite it being Ed's birthday, Robb, technically the highest-ranking individual in their party, called it time. They should be back to Winterfell. Since then, he had washed up and found himself back in the hall, preparing to eat Ed's Namaday supper. Edwyl. Before him lay a banquet fit for a king, Ed thought to himself. Before him lay an entire suckling boar, no doubt the leftovers would be given to guardsmen or the servants. Together with roasted potatoes, fresh bread with butter and both apple and blueberry jam. There was also a nice serving of roasted leeks, cabbage, and carrots. Although there was not one present, Ed noted the absence of any sweets on the table. Perfect. While others enjoyed them, Edwyl had always preferred the more savory foods and would rather a second helping of the main dish than a serving of cake or a fruit pie. "My son, you have been ever patient today. Come, let us eat heartily and regale us with your tales of adventure," his father requested. Edwyl took the time to give a brief recount of what his day had been, with both Arya and Robb filling in when he forgot something or did not mention a detail. They had enjoyed the meal, but time had come to present gifts, or at least that is what Edwyl assumed. By custom, the youngest went first. Rukun, being just a babbling babe still, was safely passed over. After receiving a nod from their father, Bran stood up and walked over, in front of him. "Happy Namaday, Ed. My gift is this hunting knife." Bran held in his hands a small knife, no more than 8 fingers in length. The accompanying scabbard was simply, but expertly detailed as well. No doubt it was commissioned by his father in Bran's name. Exaggerating so as not to offend Bran, Edwyl thanked him. "Well, this looks like a knife fit for a lord, dear brother. Many thanks." Bran smiled brightly before returning to his seat. Next up, Arya stood and walked over to him. "I have personally prepared a great parcel for you. Here." What Arya handed him, made the rest of them very confused. It was a helmet, reserved for the guardsmen, upturned to serve as a primitive bucket, filled with small tiles of what looked like, is that metal? Indeed it was. It's to make your own armor. When their parents looked at her suspiciously, she responded with a sheepish smile. I may have found some scraps from Mickan's forge and gathered them up, hammered out the dents, and filed holes in them so as to string them together. Arya. Mother gasped. Edwile was very amused. The metal itself was useless in its current state. It wasn't hardened to serve as effective nails, let alone armor. But regardless, it was a wonderful gesture, and one that Arya herself had actually done, not from their parents. Not needing to exaggerate, he smiled wide. Thank you very much. I will be sure to put this to good use. Arya smiled and returned to her own seat, under the watchful gaze of their mother. No doubt she would be having a conversation with her before bed. Next was Sansa's gift. Assuming the spot that her previous siblings took, she silently, though not unkindly, handed him his gift. It was an exquisite piece of needlework. There was a light grey background, and upon it as two supporters, were two stone towers, those that could be found along the walls of castles. Between them, was a dark grey wolf, though unlike House Stark's banner, this wolf was directly facing the viewer, with its two front paws each in front of one of the towers. Happy Namaday Ed. Sansa said in her quiet but graceful voice, excitedly. I thought this suits you best. Holding it up to show the rest, others began to question it. Firstly, father. Dear one, what does it represent? Well, the wolf represented Ed as a scion of House Stark. The two castle towers represent Winterfell. I made the stance of the wolf to symbolize that Edwile would protect the castle and our house as Wolf does her cubs. It was an incredibly heartwarming gift. Sansa was the most southern of all of the Stark children, but she was still kind and loved her family dearly. He heard his mother sniff, assuming it was tears of joy. Robb. It was his turn to present his gift. Admittedly, all the gifts so far were actually quite wonderful. Standing, he made his way to his brother. I have said it far too many times to count by now, so I shall refrain from wishing you a happy you-know-what. He decided to open up playfully to the chuckles of Sir Roderick and his father, but to the mild, but weak-willed disappointment of his mother. He handed Ed his gift. You spend more time in the library than the rest of this combined, yet even so, with the assistance of Maester Lewin, we found a tale of the early Winter Kings that even you have yet to read. Robb presented proudly. Taking the scroll delicately, Edwile thanked him profusely for the gift. Robb had no doubt that after supper, Ed would take the rest of his evening to begin reading it. He returned to his seat to await the final gifts, from their parents. Standing up, his father addressed Edwile directly, but from his body language, the room at large. My son, I hope you shall find it in you to forgive us, but your mother and I decided to share our gift to you. Oh please, it said, of course he'd forgive father. Your mother and I have watched as you have grown into an intelligent, brave, and loving man. At this, he turned to Robb. Your brother, Robb, will learn how to rule Winterfell and the North after I pass. An odd thing to say. His father once again turned to Edwile. And how is he to do that, without his closest vassal and lord? Eddard Stark, proudly, openly smirked. It began to slowly dawn on Robb, and by Edwile's face, to him too. But before either could comment, his father finally gifted him his present. Edwile, some weeks ago I wrote to King Robert, and through our correspondence, he has granted my request. At his father's gesture, Sir Roderick walked over to Edwile with a scroll in his hands. Their father continued. Edwile, by my decision, I have decided to name you Edwile Stark, Lord of Moat Cailin and Defender of the Marches of the Neck. At this, thunderous applause could be heard from everyone within the chamber, including from the surrounding guards, some of whom no doubt, would be sent with Edwile when he moved there permanently. Looking over to Edwile, Robb noticed that he began to tear up, with a few running down his cheeks. In a break with his normally reserved manner, Edwile leapt from his seat and ran up to father and mother and embraced them with a tight hug. Their father let go of him after a few moments. This time he addressed the entire family. Remember, when the snow falls, and the white winds blows, he started. The family responded. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Notes. I tried to base the Hunters of the Guard off of the early units of Jaggers from the German princely states and before. Sometimes, though not often, also used by the Holy Roman Empire. I know many of you are waiting for me to address Lionel, the events of Robert's rebellion, and the direwolves. Please understand, I have no intention of writing this story without getting to them. Please be patient and understand that I shall address that at an appropriate time within the plot of this story. Chapter 5, And to Hunt. Chapter Text 297 AC. Rob. How did it all go wrong? Rob thought to himself. Rob had been sent by his father, along with Edwile and a contingent of the Winterfell Guard to settle a small dispute amongst two farmers. No doubt it was a small test for Rob. Their party had left the gates of the castle at early morning, and they rode for nearly 2 hours before they reached their destination. The morning's ride, they would soon find out, was going to be the best part of their day. As soon as they arrived, the two farmers were already going at each other, each blaming the other for everything under the sun. From poor crop yields to stolen animals, to even one accusation of a son being a member of a bandit group. If only we paid more attention to that one. With the help of the guards, Rob managed to calm down the farmers before he decided to separate them, in hopes of resolving this peacefully. He elected to speak to one farmer and ordered Edwile to speak to another. Little did he know, but that single decision would change not only today, but his brother and himself forever. When he and two guards entered the hut of one farmer, the farmer immediately began to shout about his rights and the wrongs of the other farmer. So loud, Rob almost did not hear the commotion coming from the other hut. Thinking that Edwile was experiencing the same thing, he did not immediately react, something he would regret. One of the guards elected to go and inspect just in case, before running back just as quickly. Bandits. Rob went wide-eyed. This was the first time something so visceral had happened to him. Finally he broke the silence. Come. Brandish your arms, we must help my brother. Rushing out of the hut, Rob and his small group encountered much more than just a small party. Rob had assumed that it was just 2 or 3 bandits, little did they know that there were at least a dozen of them. He turned his attention back to the other hut and raced for it, the sword in his hand felt heavy. He had practiced with it, every day, he just hoped he wouldn't have to use it. Rushing in, slamming through the door, much to the chagrin of the guards, he saw a bloodbath. In front of him lay 5 bodies. 2 of Edwile's guards along with 3 bandits. Edwile! Edwile! He called out for his brother, the dark and hazy atmosphere blinding even in the small space. Here! Edwile responded shakily. The first, and only, time Rob would ever hear his brother use that tone. He found him in the back corner, he was unwounded as far as he could tell, but the sword he held was unclean. He had to use it. Rob realized sadly. It all happened so fast, brother. One moment the farmer is yelling, the next some man jumps out of the back, from behind some blankets. He killed Raklan, so fast he couldn't even draw his sword. Edwile sounded so terribly shaky. Gilbar managed to kill that bandit and another one that came through the door before he was killed too. What about the third bandit? He pointed at the body. Edwile's eyes widened but then became normal again. I didn't think, it was all just a reaction, he kept saying, I'll stick you like a hog as he was stabbing Gilbar. Before I knew it, I had run him through with my sword. Rob closed his eyes in both sadness, at the loss of his brother's innocence, but also happiness for his survival. At this point, the guards had left to deal with the rest of the bandits. Rob opened his eyes to meet Edwile's, but his terrified ones became worried ones. Behind you. Rob turned around just in time to see as a bandit had managed to slip by their men and into the tent. What we are there? He sneered with a menacing smile. Seems like the cubs got lost from the pack they did. The man swung his sword back and Rob assumed the position he had been trained for. Coming down in a strong, but stupid move, the bandit thought to hammer him away like a hammer upon an anvil. When the man's sword inevitably bounced back from crashing against castle-forged steel, Rob took his chance. Remembering his training, instead of going for an overhanded strike as the bandit had done, he thrusted low, aiming at his lower abdomen. The bandit recovered quickly and managed to block and deflect the blow before going through with his momentum and slashing at his neck. Rob ducked and used a more controlled slash to target the arm of his opponent, the rough leathers doing nothing against his steel. With a great cry, the man's sword arm was cut off. Before he could think, Rob followed through by running his blade into his chest, right where the heart was. Finally, his consciousness caught up to him. Gasping for air as if he had been drowning, Rob fell backward right next to Edwile. "I think I'll rest here for a while." Sansa. Her day had started normally. She attended the lessons of Olnan, her Lord Father having sent the Septa back south after a particular incident with Arya. She was leaving lunch with her sister, Bran, and her parents when a guard ran in, bowed before her father, and whispered something to him. She had never seen her father more angry in his life. Her mother was actually cowering. She knew her brothers oft thought her to be a southern flower, but she was more worldly than she let on. Perhaps she didn't like to run around in the mud, but that didn't mean she wasn't a northerner. It was because of this that she knew something was dreadfully wrong. She had read in her lessons with Olnan that her father was called the Quiet Wolf. That he was so feared as a commander that some were more scared of him than Robert Baratheon. Her father never shouted, he never raised his voice. But as he rose from the table, and called for his armor and for Sir Roderick, she feared the worst. Eddard. He was furious, he was angry, he was apoplectic. But more than that, he was terrified. A guard had just ridden all the way to Winterfell to report the ambush on his sons. His boys, his two eldest. If something were to happen to them, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. He always strode, but today he did it with a purpose. As he walked to the armory, all in his way quickly got out of it. Just one look at him would show that he was not to be meddled with at the moment. Striding out of the family wing, he crossed the yard to the armory. Already he watched as an entire company of the guard was being raised and prepared. Sir Roderick was speaking with his nephew, Sir Jory, as he appeared before them. When they saw him, they snapped to attention. Behind him as he walked over were two members of his guard, Alyn and Harwin. "My lord, the men are preparing and shall be ready by the time you have your armor on," Sir Roderick noted in a neutral report. "Good." Eddard continued further into the armory to prepare himself, Jory following to assist his lord with getting his heavy armor on. Within a quick time, Eddard once again left the armory for his horse. He looked up and saw his dear cat with Sansa looking on from the balcony. Sansa seemed worried and Cat looked close to death with sadness. Mounting up, he turned to the 50 men gathered. "Come. We ride." Snapping the reins, his mount took off out of the gates. Rob and Edwile traveled there in 2 hours at a light pace. Eddard would be damned sure to get there within the hour. Rob. After being on the ground, recovering, he elected that enough was enough. He was still shaking something terrible, but he had a duty to complete. Leaving the hut, he left Edwile some private time. The guards had already moved the bodies respectfully. Standing in the open air, he collected himself before speaking to Kyne, the lead guard of his detachment. "My lord, all the bandits have been dealt with. I have sent a messenger back to Winterfell for some more reinforcements just in case." "Good. Do we know how this started?" "Not yet, my lord, but we have captured one of the bandits alive. Only a young man by the looks of it." "Where is he?" "We must question him." Kyne motioned over to a small lean-to where 3 guards were standing watch over a dirty man in chains. "Come Kyne, walk with me." As Rob walked over to the prisoner, he noticed as Edwile left the hut. Still very reserved and fearing, but still in control of himself. Focusing back in front of him, soon he made it to the prisoner. The prisoner didn't appear to be a veteran man. He was young, roughly his own age. His skin was scarred and dirty and his body was as tense as a staring predator, though looking into his eyes, the man obviously thought himself closer to prey at this very moment. Looking down at him, Rob spoke, trying to hold back his anger. "What's your name?" He trembled with fear. Kyne backhanded him. "Answer him." Quivering, he finally answered. Hormar, me lord." "Why did you attack us? Do you know who we are?" It sounded petty and lordly, but Rob didn't know how else to phrase the question. "Well, me lord, we was looking to steal from the farmers. One of the dead, Devran, the son of one of them farmers he was." Rob sighed internally. So that accusation was true. So much good it did now. One of the farmers was dead and the other was severely injured. The prognosis wasn't good. Hormar, are you aware that you attacked the party of the sons of the Lord of Winterfell? The man's eyes widened at that. He just came to the same realization that he wouldn't leave this field alive. Attacking the guards of Winterfell was already a crime sentenced with an extended visit to the Winterfell dungeons, at the very least. But attacking them as they escort the heir and the spare of the Lord Paramount, there was only sentencing for that. Robb tried to control the situation. So you were unaware of who you were attacking? Not me, me lord. Blackpot never told us nothing. Last time someone questioned him, he cut their throat out, he did. He slowly nodded. I see. The guards counted 101 bandits, yourself included. Is that all in your band? Or is there more out there? The man began tearing up while shaking his head. No, that's it. A great part of Robb felt pity for the young man, no older than himself. He didn't know why. He had assaulted people, no doubt caused great pain, he had broken countless laws, and probably much more, but he still felt for him. But he had a duty. Hormar, I am afraid that I will have to find you guilty. Before he could finish, a hand landed roughly on his right shoulder. Turning, it was Edwyle. He motioned with his head to speak in private. Ed, what is it? You know that I cannot let him go. Edwyle actually sneered at him. Of course I know that. He snapped, but quietly enough to stay amongst them. He continued. But they attacked me first. He left his last sentence hang in the air until Robb realized his intention. The man who passes the sentence, should swing the sword. Robb hesitated but eventually nodded. Very well. Continue. Edwyle returned with his own nod in thanks and walked up to Hormar. Silently looking at him, Edwyle turned to Kyne and another guard. Fetch a stump, or a small table, or a stool. One of the guards nodded in the affirmative while the other one and Kyne lifted him up by his armpits and began to drag him away. Robb decided to ignore the whimpering pleas. He saw that this was not going to be a person who went out gracefully. Some of the other guards began to surround the area to look on. This would be the first execution that either of them would do personally. Edwyle. He had to control his breathing. He had killed a man for the first time today. It wasn't like the songs about battle. It was short, brutal, and oh so quick. I think that was the worst part. The finality of it. But as a son of House Stark, he had a duty to perform. He felt regret at snapping at Robb earlier, and he appreciated his continued presence. As neither he nor Robb's swords were long enough to properly conduct an execution, one of the guards gave them their great sword to carry it out. Kyne bent Hormar over a short stool that was found in one of the huts. Though the man was frightful, he offered no incredible resistance. In an attempt to imitate father, he drew the great sword out of its scabbard and rested the point on the ground, grasping the handle with both his hands. His bent. I, Edwyle Stark, Lord of Moat Cailin and Defender of the Neck, do sentence you, Hormar, to death for the crime of banditry. Just because I haven't taken up residence yet, doesn't mean that I can't use the title. Should you have any last words, speak to them now, or may you forever keep them. Tilting his head as far as he could, being held down, he looked at Edwyle. I'm sorry, me lord. Truly. He cried out. Edwyle nodded in acceptance, his lower lip hugging his upper one into a frown. Picking up the sword, he held it above his head for a lightening moment. Though not as gracefully as his father, he succeeded in a clean kill. Like hunting, no matter what a man did, if you didn't execute him in one strike, it was considered a great dishonor. Neither he, nor Robb or the guards moved from their spots, allowing a sense of morose quietness to fill the air. Finally, Ed lifted his gaze and gestured for one of the guards to take back their great sword. My thanks, Gregor. Ed softly spoke his gratitude. Gregor responded in an equally soft, but grizzled voice. Of course, me lord. Suddenly, they heard a quiet thundering. Sir Jory Castle. Jory had been given the honor of riding beside Lord Stark. His uncle was ordered to remain back at Winterfell. For the past hour, Lord Stark had kept the men at a brutal pace. Jory had never seen his lord like this. Even during the Greyjoy Rebellion, Lord Stark had held a controlled anger behind him. But today, he rode like a man possessed. He pitied the men that would stand for them. They were closing in on the spot that Lords Robb and Edwyle had travelled to. Just another hill and they'd arrive. This far out, there was only a small trail to the farm, having left the King's Road far back. With 50 of the Winterfell Guard behind them, he and Lord Stark grazed over the last hill, to find a small but definitive site of a battle. Robb. The thundering had gotten louder until it became recognized as the thundering of horses. A large group of them. Edwyle and himself had left Winterfell with roughly a dozen guards. It appeared that his Lord Father had left with nearly a tenth of the castle guard as what looked like 50 or more came roaring over the hill. They only stopped when their father and Sir Jorah reined in their mounts, all of them loudly panting. Must have ridden hard. Robb. Robb, tell me you are all right. Ed. Ed. His father seemed so worried. The messenger must have gotten to him quickly. Father. Father, we are fine. He took the initiative. Edwyle came around one of the huts. He needed a minute alone after the execution. At this point, father got off his horse and handed the reins to one of the guards. His father embraced him in a very tight hug. I was so worried for you and your brother. His father whispered in his ear. He could feel a tension leave his body. Father, Edwyle he had to pass a sentence. His father left the embrace and looked at him, mildly shocked. Robb took the time to fill in all the details, including the fact that both he and Ed were blooded. His father looked both shocked and sad. In a way, he sympathized with it. His father's sons had finally tasted the violence and shock of battle. No doubt he wished for them, at best, to never taste it, at worst, wait much longer than their short lives. His father looked at him in the eyes and let out a defeated sigh. Come, my sons. Let us leave the wretched place. Robb had a feeling, one most likely shared with Ed, that he couldn't agree more to father's wish. Today had been a begrimed day. They would never be the same. Perhaps, in the future, he and Ed would look back and see this as, however terrible, a necessary crucible into adulthood. Robb could only hope. Something good should come of this day. Chapter 6, A Bearcub joins the pack of wolves. Notes. Once again, I am aware that Daisy Mormont is older than Robb, but I have decided to lower the age difference as much as possible but still making it a comfortable change. Daisy Mormont 280 AC, 17. Robb Stark 283 AC, 14. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 297 AC. Catelyn. It took all her effort not to cry. Earlier in the year, her two boys, her sweet, kind boys became men. Oh, so much younger than she ever hoped. When Robb and Edwyle were attacked, she prayed to all the gods, both the seven and the old gods. They answered her prayers. Her boys came home safe. She soon realized, however, only physically. To her eternal anguish, neither Robb nor Edwyle was the same. Gone were the daily smiles from Robb. He still had them, but he was never so quick to produce one. And Ed, her little Ed. He became even more closed off. He dedicated every hour of every day to the tiltyard and his father's studies. He no longer wished to read as voraciously as he had done previously. He was shorter with people. At one point he actually snapped at Arya, at which point she had to track down her daughter and comfort her. Edwyle became obsessed with protecting the family. She feared it would pull him too far into madness, as if he were to hide so far within furs on a cold night, only to be unable to escape from the mess that would be made. Thankfully, about a month later, her dear Ned finally sat down with Edwyle in his solar. No one else was allowed in and they remained shut in for nearly 3 hours. Though she didn't know what was discussed, it seemed to help. Slowly, Ed became more open again and apologized to his siblings. Neither father nor son ever spoke about what was shared, but she could assume at least part of the conversation. After all, her own husband was in the same position as Ed was at his age, the spare. Just as he had a special connection with Robb, so too did he have one with Ed. But enough of that. The tears she spilled today were not out of sadness, but out of happiness. Today would be the day that her Rob would finally marry a woman grown and flowered. Daisy Mormont was admittedly not her first choice. Initially, she thought of her as too lowly, too savage, too northern. She was still bitter at her husband's decision to have Rob marry in the north. She'd probably be bitter about it until her death, but she learned to get over it. Marriage, she learned, was more than just her wants. She would allow her husband this victory. Her small victory was his promise to think about other marriages for Edwyle, Arya, Bran, and Rickon. She acquiesced on Rob and Sansa. After all, the eldest son and eldest daughter were powerful tools to a Lord Paramount. Daisy Mormont was still not her first choice for a northern woman, but she always wanted her children to marry for love, unlike all those who were sentenced to marriages during the rebellion, no matter how terrible or well they turned out. Daisy Mormont. The last time she had been to Winterfell was during the harvest festival with her mother, oh so many years ago. It was a magnificent castle. The twin curtain walls with a moat betwixt them was awe-inspiring alone, not even counting the massive keep within the walls. To be completely honest with herself, she didn't know what to make of this marriage. She herself was the heir to her mother's domain. After this, however, it would be Alysanne who would assume the heirship. She always thought she'd live her life on Bear Island, raising it to prosperous heights, something that her cousin destroyed the chance of when he fled. Her own mother was shocked when the first letter appeared from the Rookery. She still remembers the day well. Her lady mother called her into her solar and showed her the scroll that had been sent. After all the lengthy introductions, her eyes became like serving plates when she read that one line: House Stark extends an offer that the next Lady of Winterfell to be of House Mormont of Bear Island. At first, she dismissed it out of hand. In an attempt to deflect, she cited the numerous unknowns that would come from such a politically unlikely marriage. Though inside, she was thinking of herself. She was not foolish. She knew she had beauty. But she was aware that their current Lady of the North was a Southerner. Daisy had no idea if her children would be so influenced. She was beautiful, but she was also very tall, more so than most women. She was a warrior also and unafraid of combat. Would the next Stark in Winterfell be so inclined to see her as a complete woman, or as only as they wanted to see her? Her solution. She asked her mother to respond to Lord Stark her political worries. Though her mother agreed, she privately considered it a test. If Lord Stark, and his heir who he no doubt included in discussion, did not pursue it further, she knew she had made the right choice. Then, some weeks later, another raven arrived. It seemed like House Stark would not back down so easily. She remembers the faces of her sisters when her mother finally shared the news. Though by that point, the marriage was all but agreed on, Daisy bore no reservations of leaving her betrothed at the Weirwood if she judged him to be unfit as a husband. Make no mistake, she was loyal to House Stark, but to the house first, then to the persons who made it. However, it seemed to be in the past regardless. When they first arrived in Winterfell, about a week previous, she had met the entire Stark household in the courtyard of the keep. Her lord and master, Eddard Stark, stood strong, silent, a certain calmness, like the eye of a terrible storm. She admired that. Next was his wife. Lady Catelyn seemed nice enough, if not a little distant. Daisy made an educated guess that it was more out of observation than immediate disgust. One cannot blame her, looking out for her eldest's interests. She finally came upon him. The third person in line overall. Robb Stark. He was not overly tall, roughly the same height as her. But he was much broader. While he was a boy of only 4 and 10 years, he had an aura of maturity around him. And admittedly, he was not bad on the eyes to look at. A strong, long face led to an equally strong and chiseled cheekbones and chin. But gone were the telltale signs of being a Stark. His dark reddish hair coupled with his ocean blue eyes could be nothing more than the symbols of his Tully mother. And his voice, God's that voice. My lady. Be welcome to Winterfell. Robb Stark had greeted her. Though he did not smile, he did not have a mean or stern face. She didn't blame him. Just as she was entering new territory, so was he. At that point, she had met the rest of the family. Next was Edwyle Stark, the second son and child of Lord Stark. Edwyle was in much closer appearance to his father than either Robb or his younger brothers. Sharing the long and chiseled face, he shared the same grey eyes as his father and darker hair. He was much more reserved but was nice and respectable enough. Her immediate views on Sansa, the eldest girl, were negative. Certainly she didn't know the girl, but she possessed an attitude of a southerner, something she had been raised on being a bad thing, not to mention her experience with her cousin's wife. She had to promise herself to keep an open mind and try to open to her. Arya Stark was the closest she saw any of her own siblings in. No doubt Arya had much of the famed wolf's blood in her. A wild child to be sure. I very much look forward to sharing time with her. She seems to be the most fun and free. The last two children were Brandon, who went by Bran, and Rickon Stark. Though Bran was older than Rickon, both were still quite young, so Daisy did not make any impressionable assumptions yet. From that first day, she and her family were housed in the best guest wing Winterfell had to offer. It was something of a shock to Daisy if she is being honest with herself. Bear Island was strong in its own way. Each of their warriors were tried and true, but Winterfell was a different breed. The simple scale of the castle was the first shock. Then both the number and equipment of the Winterfell Guard impressed her as well. Certainly this was not a time in which a rebellious house should act out. Daisy estimated that if the Boltons, because of course it would be those disgusting leeches, rebelled, she doubted that Winterfell would need to call upon their own banners. No doubt they still would though. She also spent time with her betrothed. He allowed her and her family to rest on the first day, not speaking to her again until the small feast that evening. She was very appreciative of that. It had been a long journey. But in the days that followed, they spoke at great lengths when they broke their fast before he would take her on walks around Winterfell. Though the family apparently usually stuck to the understandable places like the family wing, the family hall, the courtyard, and so on, Robb gave her a tour of the castle at large. Every day going through a different part. He even included the guard's tower, the headquarters of the Winterfell Guard. It was during these quiet walks that she learned of the trials that he and Edwyle faced earlier in the year. She was shocked that boys so young had been in a true fight. Her respect for him only increased. On the fourth day after her arrival, she decided to go and participate in the tiltyard. Time to see what his thoughts about that were. She had thought to herself. But out of custom and necessity, she requested to Lord Stark if she could have access to the practice yard. She was surprised when he not only granted her request but did so quickly and without a second though seemingly, handing her a signed parchment to give to his master-at-arms. She specifically took a route to the courtyard that would take her in the presence of the Stark boys. Although neither Robb nor his brother Edwyle approached her, she knew they were watching as she walked up to Sir Roderick Castle, the master-at-arms for Winterfell. Robb thought that he would remember that day for the rest of his life. He had been in conversation with Edwyle and Sir Jorah when he saw his betrothed, Daisy Mormont, stalk into the practice field, a scroll in hand, right up to Sir Roderick. What in the God's name is she doing? He had a suspicion that she was wanting to practice. He had no problem with that. His own sisters would soon join him and Edwyle too. But then she impressed him. Denying any of the swords or spears or the normal weapons, it appeared that Lady Daisy had elected to choose a mace of all weapons. And then Sir Roderick called for the spa to begin. Daisy was facing Alan, a close guard of his lord father who had been given the day off. And she was glorious. Gods, how she moved. Keeping his face numbly terse, he could only mentally gape as he saw his future wife not only be able to keep up with Alan, but within only a few minutes, make him yield. Soon, she called for more opponents and after another 3 bouts of facing off with other guards, she called it a day. She had won every single spar. Daisy. She had enjoyed being able to spar for the first time in weeks. Her long time spent traveling and initial days in Winterfell had hampered her normal schedule. She returned the borrowed mace to Sir Roderick and turned to walk away. She made sure to look at Robb Stark and his companions. His face was neutral, though after a moment, he cracked an incredibly small smirk and nodded once. Daisy actually had to remind herself to keep walking. Perhaps this marriage will not be so terrible after all. Eddard. The day had finally come. It had been about a week and a half since the Mormonts' arrival. Since then, delegations from much of the north had arrived as well. Houses Sewin and Tall Heart arrived first due to their proximity, but more of the greater houses, Glover, Dustin, Hornwood, Flint, Riswell, Umber, Bolton, Carstark, and many others arrived. Some in greater numbers than others. House Marndale showed up with great fanfare. Wyman Marndale apparently unbothered that his granddaughter had not been chosen. I'll have to award them some other benefit for being passed over. Houses Umber and Carstark were respectful enough, though neither Ricard nor the Great Yon was completely happy for the reason. Great Yon would get over it, as long as he gets to kill something at least once a year. Ricard would require a gentler soothing over. The houses Glover, Hornwood, Flint, and Forrester were simply happy to be invited. House Riswell also brought a not insignificant number of their household. House Dustin, however, it appeared that they would send the bare minimum. Lady Barbary informed him through Raven that she would be unable to attend, so therefore would be sending her declared heir in her stead. No doubt both to snub himself, as well as to get her heir out of her way. Orphan Dustin was a long-distant cousin to William Dustin. Through the widow's law, Lady Barbary had been granted the domains of House Dustin until she passed. After her passing, lordship would be granted onto a Dustin, in this case, Orphan. Regardless, he would not dwell on it. Today was to be one of merriment and celebration. The heir to the north was to be married, and regardless of lost opportunities, all the northern lords found comfort in that Robb was marrying within the north. It was almost time for the wedding ceremony. Only a few minutes out. All the guests were gathered in the Godswood, but he found himself in Robb's room, together with Edwyle as well. I am so very happy for you, Robb. I am glad she is smarter and better than you. Edwyle teased at the expense of Robb's continued nerves. Eddard thought it high time to speak to his eldest alone. Edwyle, return to the Godswood, I must have words with your brother. Looking between him and Robb, Ed nodded in understanding. He wished his brother luck before leaving the chambers. Eddard waited until he closed the door fully. How are you feeling? Robb rolled his eyes, though not in sarcasm, but in a sense of being overwhelmed. I thought I was prepared for this, I thought this would be easy. He chuckled at that. So too, did I. When I wed your mother, it was all in such a rush, that it wasn't until your grandfather handed her over to me that it came to me. It crashed upon me like 1,000 crashing waves. He put his hands on each of Robb's shoulders. You'll be fine. Just remember the words. And when the time comes tonight for you and her to seal the marriage. Both father and son grimaced at the awkward topic. Just do what feels natural. Remember, she is your partner, not your subordinate. Tonight is not all about you. His son nodded before gulping. If he hadn't felt the same way when he was younger, he might even be laughing right now. I shall take my leave. I am returning to the Weirwood, take a moment. He turned to leave before making one last note. But do not be too long, a husband does not want to leave his future wife waiting. Robb. After his father left, he only took a few moments to align himself. Taking some deep breaths, he left the confines of his chambers. Making it out of the keep, he found himself before his father and the rest of his family and the gathered lords of the north beneath the heart tree. His mother and siblings all looked very proud of him, but his father still had his lord's face. He held ice with the point on the ground, like he often did with executions. Sooner than he anticipated, the talking of the lords quieted down when at the end of the makeshift aisle, Daisy appeared, arms linked with her mother's. Gods, she is beautiful. Her height and build did nothing against Robb, much to the previous fear of Daisy. In fact, he loved her more for it. Soon, Daisy reached where he and his father were awaiting. Without much fanfare, his father began. Who comes before the gods? Lady Mage responded. Lady Daisy, of House Mormon. A lady grown, trueborn, and noble. Who comes to claim her? This time, Robb spoke. Robb, of House Stark. Heir to Winterfell. Who gives her? Mage, of House Mormont. Her mother. Turning directly to Daisy, his father spoke. Daisy, do you take this man, grown and trueborn, to be your husband? Daisy. This was it. All the past weeks, and the rest of her life, led to this moment. This was the last chance to get out of this. But for some reason, she didn't want to. I take this man, before the gods, as my husband. Her mother gave her hand to Rob, at which point both kneeled for the heart tree. She heard her good father begin to pray. May the old gods look down favorably on this matrimony. We beseech thee to aid in their lives, and to always watch over them, no matter how far apart or close they are. At the slight nudge of Rob, they both stood at the same time. The ceremony was already over. Lord Eddard addressed all the gathered nobles. Time for the feast. Edwile. The ceremony had been pleasantly quick. Although he had never attended one, he had heard that the wedding ceremonies of the seven could take hours, with endless songs and prayers and preaching. By custom, Rob carried his new wife from the Godswood, all the way back to the Great Hall, where the final pieces of the feast were being laid out on the tables. Watching the two newlyweds was interesting. Despite his original assumption, it seemed that neither was truly uncomfortable. At the moment, that is. For the best, he hoped. He noticed that Rob and Daisy had found a small friendship in one another. It was his hope that this could sprout into love. The feast was in full swing. Many of the lords were happy at this ceremony. During the early reign of his father as Lord of Winterfell, House Stark was still in a precarious situation. After father, it was only baby Rob who was left. Uncle Benjen had joined the Black brothers. Now, with a family of 4 inheritable men, the eldest now married, the northern lords were far more comfortable in the stability of the kingdom. Before most of the guests arrived, his father told him to keep an eye open at any of the daughters that the lords would bring with them. Though not even close to being betrothed, his father explained that it was never too early to begin, at least, looking. After some hours of eating and drinking and shouting and arm wrestling, one of the lords began to speak. At first he didn't know who, but looking up from his tankard, his size could only mean one person. Lord Jon Umber, the Great Jon. Time for the bedding. He shouted, much to the applause of the rest of the lords. Originally, he found the entire thing distasteful, but then his mother gave him another perspective. If he didn't participate, who would look after his good sister's dignity? As such, as soon as the declaration was made, he jumped up and sprinted for Daisy. Looking up, she was alarmed at the sudden movement, but he just whispered to her. Be calm, I shall try to stop the worst. Daisy, who at Lord Umber's declaration became white-faced, nodded in quiet thanks. At that point, the rush of men finally reached the two. Just as Rob was being carried away by the women, Daisy was by the men. Edwile was glad he protected a degree of his good sister's dignity. They reached Rob's chambers where he was already deposited. Leaving Daisy in the chambers, Edwile was the last one out. He couldn't resist a brotherly rib. Leaning into his ear, trying to avoid looking down, he spoke. Make me an uncle, Rob. Rob, already nervous about the bedding, glared at him before punching him lightly in the stomach and pushing him out of the room. Edwile couldn't resist laughing. Notes. *** My college is currently in finals week. This will most likely, though not necessarily, be that last chapter updated this week. Unless I find some time to procrastinate, I shall probably not update again until the middle of next week. *** The next chapter will finally address the presence of direwolves as well as Lyanna and Robert's rebellion. Chapter 7, of Lost History and Worse Days. Notes. I know I said I probably would not update until next week. But I have elected to procrastinate from studying for my astrophysics exam. I thought this was a better use of my time. At first, I thought of splitting this into 2 chapters, but I promised all things to be addressed at the next update, and I keep my word. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Rob. In the name of Robert of the House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm, I, Eddard of the House Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, sentence you to die. Should you have any last words, speak them now, or may you forever keep them. I know I broke my oath. And I know I'm a deserter. I should have gone back to the wall and warned them. But I saw what I saw. I saw the White Walkers. People need to know. If you can get word to my family, tell them I'm no coward. Tell them I'm sorry. His father just looked at the man before nodding once in acceptance. Rob had watched as his father execute a number of deserters of the Night's Watch. This was not the first time he had done so, but this time it was different. Rob had always held true to father's belief that no matter how wrong a person was, it was important to show respect even in the face of death. This deserter was different though. Sir Roderick mentioned that the young man had eyes of a grizzled veteran. The deserter's mumblings and terrified demeanor was different than most, warning of things to come that hadn't come for thousands of years. In the face of death, men can become mad. Rob elected not to think too much of it. There were more important matters to deal with. His father's party, made up of Lord Stark, himself, Edwyle, Sansa, Arya, and Bran, along with Sir Roderick and a company of men, began to travel back to the great castle of the north. Rob had hung back to carry on conversations with young Arya. "I am glad that you did not look away, you and Bran should be proud of yourselves. Father would have known if you looked away." Arya, normally a young child with the energy of a wild stallion, was very morose. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "It made me feel ill, Rob." "Good. Only a monster does not feel when they see death." He tried comforting his sister. "Remember that feeling, Arya. You and Sansa are being taught the blade, but remember, true power comes not from taking a life, but knowing when to." Arya, the youngster, seemed to try and think on this advice as her face scrunched up in thought. "Good. Better she think on that than continue to see the execution every time she closes her eyes." Rob himself had become more reflective as of late. Last year, he married Daisy Mormont, now Lady Daisy Stark. They had built a small friendship during the beginning of the union, small, but it was built on a solid foundation. Since then, Daisy had fallen with child, much to Rob, and his family's, excitement. He worried constantly over her, much to her chagrin. On more than one occasion, she had to have Lord Stark escort him out of their chamber before she threw something at him from his constant hovering. Though he truly does not care whether the child is a boy or girl, for the sake of the kingdom, he prayed for a boy. Perhaps that was wrong of him to wish. But the Stark side, the logical side that has evolved through his family for 8 millennia, realized that a boy would only reinforce the safety of their house. He would dote upon any daughter just as equally, but unfortunately, if history was any teacher at all, it showed repeatedly that having a possible woman as heir created hardship for all. A disgusting thought, he told himself. How could he even think of these things before his child was even born? But admittedly, the Starks did not become the kings of winter through emotion and flagrance. They became kings because, as he was taught by Ed, they were willing to do those things that other houses either couldn't or wouldn't. As the party was riding back to Winterfell, they came across a gruesome sight. The party stopped. Riding up from the back, Rob rode until he caught up with his father and the castles. He opened his mouth to speak, wondering why they had stopped before he shut it at the obvious event. Before the party, in the middle of the road, lay a dead stag, its entrails pouring out. Dismounting from his horse, Rob walked slowly forward, to come up just behind his father. "Mountain lion," Edwyle guessed. No one spoke for an instant. Finally their father responded, not quite paying attention to either of them, apparently more focused on the scene. "There's no mountain lions in these woods." The party looked around for a quiet time until they heard the distinct sound of steel being drawn from its scabbard. All at once, those in the front of the party turned sharply with their hands on their own blades. Father had withdrawn his arming sword, having apparently found something. Before continuing, he looked back at a couple guards. "Stay with my daughters and Bran. Sir Roderick, stay with them. Sir Jory, sons, come with me. Eddard." He had found faint marks of bloods leading away for the body of the dead deer. He led his sons and captain through the woods, slowly. He then heard it. Eddard, though, that until the day he died, he would never forget that first sound. A low, and terrible growling. Turning slowly, he looked up. What he saw made his blood freeze. There before him was a truly massive animal. It had the appearance of a wolf, but its size was all wrong. And in the underbrush, shadowed from the sun, its eyes practically glowed in the darkness. "Stop!" he quietly but urgently shouted at his sons and captain. "Do not make a move." His captain and his sons stopped where they were. Eddard, despite knowing this was what you shouldn't do, couldn't resist looking directly into the eyes of this creature. A direwolf. he heard Jory say in wonder. But he wasn't concerned about that now. He kept contact with the wolf. He couldn't understand it. He felt strange, he felt wrong. His eyes were still focused, but the surroundings, the trees, the earth, the soft wind, it became twisted, as if he had been under the influence of some strong ale. But the eyes were dead focused. Neither he nor the wolf's eyes left one another. The growling began to grow in volume, and he knew then, this might be it. A warrior strong he was, not against a creature this size, not a wolf which reached the heights of a fully grown warhorse. He thought of his family. His home. He pictured each of his children. Hopefully they'll be able to run away while the creature is focusing on me. He tried to picture each of their faces in his mind as he kept eyes contact with the wolf. But he noticed a change. After each successive imagined image of his children that he went through, the volume of the wolf's growling lowered. After he finished thinking of baby Rukun, he finally closed his eyes. The direwolf had stopped growling, but he could hear it stalk forward, ever so slowly. She-wolf. Safe. Cubs. Hunger-sated. Smell. Human. Noise. Hide. Quiet. Stalk. Man blood. Blades, man fear. Seen. Focus. Warn. My cubs, man own cubs. Eyes, eyes, eyes. Wolfman. Trusted. Long time since trust. Wolfman trust. Cubs of wolf. Wolfman accept. Find. Find trust. The she-wolf slowly rose from her own cubs. Stalking forward to sniff the man. Man has cubs. Sniff cubs. Wolfman cubs scared. Trust. Trust gone since children. The she-wolf realized her predicament. No choice. Trust need. Cubs of Wolfman and cubs of mine. Wolfpack made new. Wolfpack made new. Eddard. What happened next surprised him even more. The she-wolf, after sniffing at both him and his frozen sons, stopped at Jory, and began to growl at him, but only him. Jory. He spoke softly but with a measure of urgency. Slowly, back away, return to the party, but do not send any more assistance. Jory seemed to hesitate. Go. Now. As if he was covered in molasses, Jory started to take a step back, then another, then another. He remained facing forward until he left the small group. The she-wolf stopped growling after he left. She turned and looked back at him again. She did the most unexpected thing, she nudged his hand and began to walk back to where she had been originally. She stopped before looking back at him expectedly. She wants me to follow her. Taking small steps, he began to follow the she-wolf. He realized why she wanted him to. Back in the small crevasse that she had been hiding lay an entire litter of newborn direwolves. Rob. He and Edwile remained planted where they were. This was until their father called out to them. Looking at each other, both the brothers looked forward and began to make their way over to him. In their lord father's hands was a direwolf pup. There were others still on the ground. He gave the first two to him, picked up two more and handed them to Edwile, and carried the last two himself. The she-wolf just looked on. Her head followed father's hands every time he bent down to retrieve the cubs. Come, let us continue. His father ordered and motioned them to turn back. The three of them trudged back to the road, with the she-wolf following up behind them. When they made it to the road, they found the party in defensive formations. Sir Jory, Sir Roderick, and his sister Sansa standing on the road while the Arya and Bran remained on their mounts. My lord! Jory shouted. Careful! All the guards tensed at such a massive beast. Calm. Calm yourselves. These are direwolves. These are my children's direwolves. Me lord, is that wise? Sir Roderick questioned. Perhaps not. But, I don't know how to explain it. They are ours and we are theirs. His father turned back to the she-wolf and made eye contact again. Time seemed to slow for a moment before resuming once his father nodded at the wolf. What about the she-wolf, me lord? Jory asked. His father looked back up. She shall be mine, he declared simply. What are you naming yours? Arya asked Robb excitedly. All the unpleasantness earlier in the day, seemingly forgotten at the discovery of the direwolves. Robb had chosen a cub which had a dark, grey coat. I think Grey Wind is perfect. Arya smiled widely. That is good. This she held up her own cub. Is Nymeria a good warrior woman? You've chosen well, sister. Arya smiled at the recognition. Sansa was equally ecstatic at having a direwolf pup. She was nearly inconsolable when father, who had given her the cub to hold before they set off, took it back to out in one of his saddlebags. She had elected to call her pup Lady. Lady was grey like his own, but a lighter shade, almost like old bone grey. It was an attractive coloring. And the name fit well. Though only a pup still, it seemed the most well-behaved. Bran's pup was closer in color to Grey Wind, but instead of a dark grey, it was more reflective, almost silver-like. Bran decided to call his pup Blizzard. Edwyle's wolf was the most interesting. It seemed to have an albino coloring to it. Unlike the yellow-gold eyes of most of the pups, his cub seemed to have a deep red color to them. Edwyle decided to name his cub Phantom. Robb admitted that it was a great name. Phantom never once made a noise, not so much as a whimper, totally and unequivocally quiet. They had yet to give the last cub to Rickon, but they all, without speaking, came to the understanding to allow him to name him when he got older. It was only fair. What a day! And it was still a long way to closing too. After all, none other than King Robert was to arrive today. Sansa. Today's the day. Sansa thought to herself. Robert the First Baratheon would arrive in Winterfell to name her father as the Hand of the King. Oh, of course there was no mention of this, but Sansa was not the stupid child that her brothers oft thought of her as. The king and his entire retinue would not travel the breadth of the entire realm after 9 years of not seeing her father just for the hell of it. I'll have to work on that. Swearing did not suit her. Before she was ever instructed in the tiltyard, she had been a budding southern flower. She would be the first to recognize this. However, just because she still liked to sew and sing and learn of a lady's responsibilities, did not mean that Arya and her brother did not begin to rub off on her either. Much to her amazement, Sansa had discovered that she was a promising swordsman. Most within the household assumed she would focus and excel at a more womanly activity of archery. But to the surprise of many, she found that not only was she good, but took an active interest on blades. Sure, she wasn't as good as either Robb or Edwyle, almost always losing, but neither was she completely useless. Much to her pride, her brothers once remarked that with practice, she could become a truly skilled swordswoman. Perhaps using a sword is not far from using a needle for sewing. Much to her happiness, Robb's wife began to open up to her. When Lady Dacey first arrived in Winterfell, she was, at the worst of times, cold toward her. But as soon as Sansa began to train with weapons, Dacey began to slowly open up to her. Now, she could safely say that Dacey was a very good friend. It was through Dacey that Sansa and Arya managed to begin reconciling their previous belief that they were incompatible as siblings. And not even thinking about the past months. Today. What a day today had been. She managed to keep watching as her father executed the man today. It had been the first time she had seen death like that. After the deed, she walked behind her steed and, well, she expelled a great portion of her morning meal. When she had recovered, she was glad nobody noticed until she saw Edwyle looking at her concerned. Instead of a smirk, all Ed did was offer kind eyes and a nodding of understanding. She was glad he did not call great attention to it. But now she enjoyed time with her lady, such a cute little pup. Eddard. Besides the unscheduled start to their day, his household was awaiting in the courtyard for the arrival of his boyhood friend. To his left stood his dear wife and to her left was young Rickon, old enough to walk, but still quite a young child. To his right stood his son and heir, Robb. Gods, how he's proud of him. Next to Robb stood his wife, using one arm linked with Robb while her other was cradling her grown belly. Shouldn't be too long to it now. He thought about the birthing day. Maester Lewin informed her that she was already at least 8 months along by this point. To his good daughter's right was his eldest son and daughter, Edwyle and Sansa. Though she wore a dress, through her training, her build managed to make her appearance look more exotic, like that of Visenya come again. After Sansa was Arya, bobbing up and down in excitement. At the end, was Brandon, trying not to look bored. I don't blame him, probably just wants to have fun. His focus was brought back to the courtyard as the first riders came through. The first were some Lannister guards and a Kingsguard, followed by some flag-bearers and other riders. Then, he appeared. Gods, what in the hells has he turned into? Gone was the Robert Baratheon of old. In his place, rode a great, wide man. His face flushed and his unkempt beard no doubt covering the rolls of fat on his neck. As he rode through, he kneeled, the rest of his family and household followed suit. The yard was quiet as Robert let out a deep breath from dismounting his horse. Eddard was saddened to hear that. For all the disagreements he had with Robert, and by the gods, there were many, he was still his first boyhood friend. He was still the man who he made so many pleasant memories with in the Eyrie. He was still the man who started a rebellion against their tyrannical overlord. Trudging up to him, Eddard just saw his boots and lower legs, then, with flick of Robert's fingers, he rose, his household following behind him. He made eye contact with Robert for the first time in near a decade. There was a certain tension he noted. "Your Grace." Robert did not immediately answer him. Then, with a frown, "You've got fat," he declared. The yard became ever so silent. He could feel his lady wife's eyes bulge and he sensed the tension in Robb and his other, older children. Eddard looked down at Robert's own belly. Then his king's frown became a shining smile. Robert began laughing like there was no tomorrow. There's the Robert the First no. At Robert's initiative, they embraced each other in a bear hug. He could hear the chuckles of the older members of his household, Sir Roderick, Sir Jory, and some other grizzled veterans from the rebellion. It appeared the younger members, who had never known the king, seemed to play it safe and remain quiet, though both Robb and Edwyle smirked. Leaving his arms, Robert turned to his right and greeted Cat. Cat, before he too embraced her, just as rough as he did to him, much to the surprise and mild pain of his wife. At young Rickon, he simply ruffled the boy's hair before moving back down the line in front of him. 9 years. Why haven't I seen you? Where the hell have you been? Guarding the north for you, Your Grace, Winterfell is yours. He smiled. At this point, he noted that the Queen had left the wheelhouse. Continuing down the line, Robert stood before Robb. What have we here? You must be Robb. His eldest extended his hand at the king's offered one. Strong grip. You've outdone yourself with this one, Ned. Robert shouted back at him. He looked at his good daughter next. And you must be young Robb's wife. No doubt carrying a strong northerner. Daisy thanked him politely. Before moving down, Robert leaned closer to Robb. Well done with that one, lad. He meant it as a whisper, but there was a reason that no battle led by Robert was a surprise one. He only had one level, loud. To his private displeasure, his comment made Daisy blush slightly. Really, Robert? In front of your own queen? Robert finished making his introduction with the remaining children before finally speaking to him again. Take me to your crypts. I want to pay my respects. Robert demanded gruffly. Gone was the tone of joy and aloofness. During the time of meeting his children, Eddard had greeted the cold queen as per custom. After Robert's demand, he looked at the queen. She was as terse as stone. We've been riding for a month, my love. Surely the dead can wait. Though there was no warmth in her tone. Eddard had never seen Robert look so enraged at anyone before. But instead of saying anything, Robert just turned back to him. Ned. He stalked off, leaving no argument for the decision. He came down here once a month. At least he tried to, time permitting. He always brought fresh winter roses with him. Robert was amongst the few that have ever been given access to the Stark crypts that wasn't a Stark themselves. They found themselves before his late sister's tomb. It was unusual for anyone but the Lords of Winterfell themselves to be buried here, but at his orders, tombs for his brother and sister were crafted, alongside their father. She shouldn't be here, she should be on a hill, where the winds blow and the sun shines. He sighed at Robert's comment. She was a Stark, your grace. She belongs amongst her ancestors. Robert looked to disagree, but realizing their present location, apparently decided against arguing it. People always thought him to be a drunken fool. Perhaps he was, but he certainly wasn't dumb. Contrary to his behavior, Robert was raised right alongside of him in the Uri. He was wild, no doubt, but he was still given the same education. I see her every time I sleep, Ned. He did too. He closed his eyes in an effort to remember better memories. He was unable to. Ned remembered riding up to the Tower of Joy. Gods, what a terrible name. With William, Martin, Howland, Ethan, Theo, and Mark, Eddard approached the tower. Before him stood 3 members of the King's Guard. Sir Gerald Hightower, Oswell Went, and Arthur Dane. Lord Stark. Sir Gerald opened. I looked for you on the Trident. We weren't there. Sir Arthur responded. The King's Guard possessed a unity to them, as if they all spoke for each other. Your friend, the usurper, would lie beneath the ground dead, had we been. Sir Oswell continued. The Mad King is dead. Rhaegar lies beneath the ground. Why weren't you there to protect your prince? Our prince wanted us here. Sir Gerald roared back, but not in a confrontational manner, but in a definitive one. Then the screams. He heard the screams then. Oh, if they only let him pass then, he bitterly thought. I only ever wanted Lyanna back. Where's my sister? Instead of answering, the knights put their helms on. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins. Sir Arthur commented. No, now, it ends. The following combat had been numbing for all. He lost many a good companion during that fight. Sir Gerald had perished first. A good knight, aye, but against a gang of 5, it was inevitable. Sir Oswell fell next. He was the least skilled, but he possessed great heart and loyalty. Sir Arthur was the last to fall, so close to death had it not been for Howland. After, he ran up the tower, taking great strides of many steps to reach the top as fast as possible. He remembered when he opened the door. The stench of death and blood. He was used to the smell by now, but due to being in a woman's chamber, it was ever so perverse and addled. Ned. He had heard. So faint, he barely heard it. Rushing around a hanging blanket, he saw his sister, laying in a bed with dried and fresh blood. Ned. Is that you, Ned? Tell me this is no dream. She begged ever so sadly. Nay, lie, I'm here. This is no dream. Protect her, Ned. Protect her. She implored with her remaining strength. She didn't have long left. My little Jaehaerys. He did not understand, until a wet nurse held a newborn babe in front of him. It wasn't breathing. Looking at the nurse, she looked down in sadness. Protect her. Don't let Robert kill her. Every time she spoke, she became softer and softer. He didn't have it in him to tell her that her only child was already dead. Damned Rhaegar got what he wanted, a damned daughter for his bullshit prophecy. It only cost the realm a war and over half his family. Promise me, Ned, promise me. Barely a whimper at that point. I promise, Lyanna. She nodded once and then breathed her last. He reached up and closed her eyes. Go. He said, tears unrelenting. Join father and Brandon. He smiled sadly, imagining their reunion, wherever they may be. He refocused himself and saw himself in the very crypts again. Robert was just staring at the statue, paying him no mind. He refused to dwell on the past events for now. It was time to get down to business. Robert. Why are you here? Notes. I changed some of the wolves' names. I absolutely and wholeheartedly refuse to write a story in which a child of the Lord of Winterfell names their direwolf, Summer. It is so gross and doesn't fit into my views of what the North would be. Chapter 8, of Grace and Tragedy. Summary. Will Eddard Stark follow his king south? Once thought to be negotiable, events transpire that put the entire topic into doubt. Notes. I did it. I finished finals week. Did I do well? Absolutely not. Could I have studied more? Absolutely. But I have once again returned to this story. Some of you have asked me why I got rid of the notes on my reasons for replacing Jon Snow. I shall tell you. I am not a bitch, but that doesn't mean that my self-hatred needs any more help. I love all those who disagreed with me, but respected my opinions. However, there were those that were unnecessarily rude, especially in private DMs. Thank you for understanding. I truly understand that many of you have your own wishes to add to this story. If you DM me or write a constructive review, I am sure I can work some ideas in. However, as I have already mentioned, I have created family trees for many of the houses and have my own vision of this story. I think there will be some roller coasters of my own or that you may not see coming. I try not to disappoint, however, so please let me know if I can add anything. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text 298 AC. Eddard. Robert, his brother, his blood, his closest friend and ally, had asked the impossible of him. Apparently their foster father, Jon Arryn, had fallen incredibly ill and shortly after, fallen into deep sleep. According to Grand Maester Pycelle, Jon Arryn was alive, but it was unknown if he were to ever awake. Due to this declaration, Queen Cersei had quickly called on Robert to appoint her father, Tywin Lannister, as the Hand of the King. Something that Eddard was not fond of looking forward to. He was a damn good administrator, none but the Mad King can deny that, but I'll be damned if he is allowed into that position ever again. Which is why Robert had made the long journey to ask him to serve as his hand. While they both loved Lord Arryn, neither could deny that he was not a very effective hand at the moment. Damn it, Ned. I need someone I can trust. I'm surrounded by vipers and thieves on all sides. Robert had yelled at him. Eddard was hesitate. Since the royal party's arrival, it had become obvious that the Crown Prince, Prince Joffrey, was not right in the head. There was a certain glint in his eyes. Oh, many a maid and lady blushed at his dashingly good looks, but Eddard was a man, tried and true. He had seen the eyes of madmen before, and he didn't like what he saw when he looked at the prince. Let us finally join our blood. As we were always meant to. My son, your daughter, we shall be blood brothers at long last. Eddard would not accept. Oh, if his lady wife knew of this offer, he would surely hear no end of it. But he would have none of it, none. Already his bannermen were expecting another northern marriage for his eldest daughter, that coupled with the prince's behavior, made it an easy choice for him. He promised Robert that he would think over the offer of being hand. In truth, he wanted to deny it too. But that wouldn't sit right with him. Robert had his faults, no doubt. Eddard would be, and has been, the first to point them out. But the bonds made through childhood adventures and battle blood, those are bonds not so easily broken. It felt wrong to deny Robert's both requests. Which is why he found himself in his bedroom, discussing with Cat. Robert asked me to be his hand. He stated simply. Turning around from where Cat had put on a nightgown, she responded with a smile. Oh, how grand. It will be good to be in the South once more. I do hope you accepted. His silence made her look at him sharply. Ned. My love, I told him that we would discuss it. What is there to discuss? That honor would make you the most powerful man in the realm. But I wish to remain here, in Winterfell. The South is no place for the Starks of the North. His cat walked right up to him, forcing him to embrace her a warm hug. She cupped his right cheek in her hand. I know you have many bad memories, Ned. She said calmly. Though she was not a northerner at heart, they had found love through time. Terrible, horrific memories. But when did dark thoughts ever make a northerner hesitate? I thought that is what you people ran on. He frowned at the memories of battle, of deceit, of worse times. Oh, and what does my lady wife mean at you people? Eddard put on a mask of false hurt. She saw through it right away. Step off down from that mighty warhorse, dear, you know what I mean. They moved over to the mattress and sat on its end. He held her hands in his. If I do this, there are some conditions. Of course, Ned, what are they? Cat responded with. First, I shall not go alone. If I am to ride south with Robert, I shall demand that I bring a contingent of 200 men. 200. Would the king even allow that? He will if he wishes for me to come. Second, all the children shall remain in Winterfell. She was about to protest when he held a finger up. On this, my dear cat, I am unmovable. If I am to go south, I shall be the only Stark to do so. What about me? I know you have been hardened through your life, Ned, but I fear you still hold honor too close to your heart. I know the ways of court intrigue, allow me to join you. He didn't respond at first. I am open to discussing that. She smiled in her small victory. If you have demands, Ned, so too do I. What are they? You must take with you more men. You would be the hand of the king, the most powerful man in the entire realm save for the king himself. You must rely on good, trusted men. I demand that you take at least 400 with you. But Cat, that is nearly half of the Winterfell Guard. But Robb shall be instructed to hire and train more. After all, there are always families looking to rid another mouth to feed. Eddard broke in at this point. Speaking of which, is Robb ready for this? I mean, he needs to learn at some point, but, oh, I just worry for him. Once again, Cat embraced him. Worry not for Robb, my husband, he shall have Sir Rodrik and Maester Lewin. Not to mention dear Edwyle. He chuckled at that. We also need to begin preparations for finding a betrothal for Sansa. Ned changed the subject. That we do. He broke his fast like most mornings, a simple plate of bacon, fried crisp, and 2 to 3 eggs, boiled soft. The great hall was louder and busier than normal, but not overly messy or outrageous. From his vantage place, he saw as the Queen's youngest brother, Tyrion he believed, made conversation with Maester Lewin. Noticing the most obvious absence, he asked a guard where the king was. Apparently Robert had awoken early and also had a light meal, shocking to Ned with his great size. The guard directed him to the tiltyard. Surely the king isn't sparring. Much to his initial expectation, he wasn't. Robert was watching as Robb and Edwyle were sparring. Hearing his footsteps, the king turned around. Ned. Come, I was just watching your boys. Eddard winced at the volume. Even early in the morning, Robert had no reservations about being boisterous. Joining the king at his left, Eddard watched his 2 eldest duel. To his left and rear stood Sir Meryn Trant. He seemed a decent swordsman, though he had no personal experience with the knight yet. To the king's rear and right stood Sir Barristan Selmy, a man that Eddard respected greatly. Before them, Robb and Edwyle were using live steel. Ever since that terrible day a year ago, he thought that it was appropriate to be rid of practice swords finally. Both Robb and Edwyle were strong and youthful. Dancing to a tempo of controlled aggression, neither of his boys wished to back down. Both were too engrossed to ever admit defeat. Finally, after nearly a 10-minute bout, Edwyle tricked Robb into an opening, whereupon Edwyle used the flat of his sword to smack Robb's leftmost torso rather hard. Grasping his side in pain, Edwyle smacked his sword from his hand and pointed the tip to his neck, though much further back than normal. Yield! Edwyle shouted in what sounded like anger. Robb looked with anger before finally nodding and accepting defeat. Immediately, the 2 brothers smiled and embraced each other before handing their swords back to Sir Rodrik. Damn it, Ned, it's like us in the Eyrie. Those 2 of yours are damn fine. Damn fine indeed. Robert continued to chuckle to himself, no doubt thinking of the memories they made in the Vale. Eddard decided that now was the best time. Robert, I need to. Before he could continue, Sir Meryn spoke from behind him. He is your grace. Refer to the king as such. Robert just looked at the knight in anger. No man may call me anything but your grace. Not even the bloody 7 themselves. Eddard expected him to be mildly reprimanding by Robert until he continued. Everyone but this man. If it was up to me, he would be sitting on that god's-forsaken chair. Now shut it before I have you cleaning the crypts of Winterfell for the next 5 winters. Sir Meryn bowed from the neck once before stepping back once more. Eddard decided to continue. Robert, we must speak. Well, go on then. Robert turned back to the tiltyard, watching as Prince Tommen and Bran took the practice yard, but using nothing more than blunted wood blades, more sticks than swords. But he would have none of it. Robert. We must speak in private. The king looked upset but nodded after a moment. Fine then, you miserable bastard, come, let us speak somewhere. Eddard had guided the king and his 2 knights to a small room off of the family wing. It was neither a playroom for the young children, nor a closet for the servants. It was a sitting chamber, where people could simply talk and discuss. Eddard guided them in. He took a seat with the king opposite to him. Sabaristan stopped in the door frame and turned to his brother-in-arms. "Guard the door, I shall remain with the king." Samarin simply nodded before stopping from entering. As Sabaristan entered and closed the door, Eddard could see that Samarin take up a position in front of the door. "Well, you have me alone, Ned. Now what's all this for, damn it?" Eddard took a deep breath. "This is it. I have decided to accept your invitation." "Ha! I knew it, I knew you would help me. But I have conditions." Robert's face soured but was still hopeful. "What is it?" "First, I shall come with my wife, but all my children shall remain here, in Winterfell." Robert simply waved it away. "Damn it, Ned, I wished to watch your older boys, but I understand." And Ned was sure he actually did. Though Robert always preferred to fight more than rule, he too experienced what it was like to be thrusted into the position of being a lord after the death of his parents. "The second condition is that I shall not go alone. Make no mistake, Robert, if I am to come, I ask that I be granted the right to bring my men at arms with me." "Well, of course. How many?" No doubt Robert was thinking that it would be perhaps 50, no more than 100. 400. Eddard responded. Both the king and sworn guard were silent. "That is a lot of men, Ned." But I have no intention of ending up like my brother or father." The king's face darkened. "You have the courage to think that I would. It isn't you, Robert. It's everyone else that I am worried about. Can you look me in the eyes and tell me that your court isn't teeming with corruption?" "No. Damn it, Ned, no. And my final condition is thus: you shall immediately order all Lannister men at arms to return to Casterly Rock upon the return journey to the south. The Queen may choose a total of 4 to remain, but no more. Further, before we depart, you shall send a raven to the capital ordering any of the Lannister men there to return to the rock as well. The bitch won't like that. I don't care. 1 garb. If I see 1 garb of Lannister red when we reach the capital, I shall turn me and my men around then and return to Winterfell." "This'll upset the lion," Robert said solemnly. "I have no doubt. But I refuse to live within the same keep, let alone city, as the same men who serve the likes of Tywin Lannister. And what shall I do to replace them? The City Watch is as useless as the cunt that runs them. You are not only the king, but a Baratheon of Storm's End. Call upon the Stormlords and they shall send any and all men to the capital. I have heard the Red Keep has become a den of lions. I shall not hibernate myself within such a place if it continues to be so." Robert's mood had deflated throughout the conversation. "And you are standing by this? I cannot have you any other way." Ned shook his head. "Nay. A single infraction of any of the 3 conditions and I shall return to the north immediately." Before the king could respond, there was a furious banging upon the door. Initially, the king and Sabaristan were expecting a request for the king until they spoke. A muffled voice could be heard. "Lord Stark. Lord Stark. Your presence is requested immediately." Standing in a flash, Eddard opened the door. In front of him stood Sir Jorah with 2 Winterfell guards with him. Samarin was right next to them. "Me lord, it's Brandon." His heart clenched. "He fell, me lord. He fell. He stood like a statue." "Me lord?" Jorah asked with a measure of worry. Without any more hesitation, he yelled at Jorah. "Go. Take me to him now. Someone fetch Lewyn." Him, Jorah, and the 2 guards ran through the halls of the Great Keep until they reached Bran's room. It seemed like some of the guards had just finished setting him on his bed. Not a minute behind him, he heard the chains of Lewyn as he came rushing into the room. He wanted so bad to help his boy. His dear, little boy. But he knew that just as he would not accept interruption in a fight, this was not the time to pressure Lewyn. He did the only thing he could, take control of the situation. Turning, he began giving out orders. "Jorah, keep a guard of our most trusted men outside my son's door, guards on all the doors. Jory ran off to organize the task. "You two, fetch Sir Roderick now." They two took off. "Alyn, I want my entire family gathered here now. Go, fly like the wind." "Me lord." He bowed before doing his job. At this point, his wife already came into the room. Alyn took off to summon the rest of his family. "Oh my boy!" Kat cried out in anguish as she rushed to the other side of Bran as Lewin was still examining him. Hearing the rush of equipment, he once again turned to see Sir Roderick enter the room, face going pale at seeing one of his lord's children in such a desperate state. "Sir Roderick!" He snapped his master-at-arms' attention. "Me lord." "Lock down the castle, now. I want every gate, every door, every sally port shut and guarded. I want guards posted to the rookery at all times. Raise the moat bridges." Due to the moat between the two great walls of Winterfell, small bridges were required to transit between them. They closely resembled those of gangplanks on ships. "I don't want a single person to enter or leave this castle without me knowing about it." "Aye, me lord." Sir Roderick turned to address all the orders until Eddard called his attention once more. "And Roderick. Disarm all the Lannister troops and guards and sequester them in their barracks. Isolate the king at once and only allow my guards and the king's guard to be in his presence." "And the king, me lord. I don't care if he threatens you with exile or even death. I am the lord of this castle and I still run it." Roderick went off to complete his orders. His wife finally looked up with wide eyes, for the first time since she got to the room. "Ned. What is going on?" He looked at his wife, finally allowing a shred of his fear to show. "Bran doesn't fall. Bran never falls." Notes. I hoped you all liked this chapter. Admittedly, it felt like a filler chapter to me, but I think in my own view, necessary nonetheless. Astrospace, I love and appreciate your enthusiasm, truly I do. But I will be honest and probably have no plot point involving ice dragons. I am not saying no, but repeatedly asking for it certainly won't make it so. I do hope you continue to like this story. Chapter 9, A Belletristic Man. Notes. Asterisk I hope everyone is having a good holiday week. My close relative is a Asoyaf nerd to the maximum. Like the same way Stephen Colbert is about the latter, my relative is about Asoyaf. As such, along with Asoyaf Wiki, I am using them to assist me as well. Not only do they know of all the books and notes and whatnot, they also watch every interview of GRM and everything. It is kinda off-putting actually how much they know of the universe. Regardless, they have allowed me a new perspective and I hope you like the story so far. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. You worry too much, dear sister. Do not belittle my worries, Jaime. If the Stark child wakes, and remembers what he saw, we are doomed. And if so, I shall protect all of us. You. Alone. You are good, but not against the might of the Seven Kingdoms. And certainly not against the savage wolves. Relax, sweet sister. This entire day can be put up to the Stark being worried for his child. Without proof, his fatness will soon order Stark to stand down. Sooner rather than later, we shall once again be in the capital. And what then? Robert will not leave Winterfell without his loyal mutt. Let him come. Stark and his bloody honor will never find out about us. Lord Arryn is still in deep sleep, I am told. Without him, no one in the entire realm will know. They call a group of lions a pride. But too much of that can lead to arrogance, and an arrogant lion will learn that the stalking direwolf cares little for honor in the cold, dreary conditions of a snowstorm. To the flying trout. The falcon's wings were clipped, but the handler failed completely. The falcon flies once more. Await more, my ever-sweet lady. Soon, you shall have my fingers. Jon Arryn. Jon had fallen ill some weeks ago. One evening, he began to feel unwell and summoned Coleman to his chambers. Unfortunately, he apparently fell into some form of deep sleep. Coleman had been sent back to the Eyrie by Pycelle. That was a mistake. But that wasn't the end of his misery. He had apparently awoken the week after Robert had left for Winterfell, with the intent to appoint Ned as his new hand. This was the least of his concerns, however. For today, he sat in his solar with an incredibly sad message, sent by Coleman himself. His wife Lysa had thrown herself from the moon door. Evidently, Coleman reported that he had handed a sealed letter to Lysa. Lysa had read the letter, screamed in anguish, and burnt the letter in a nearby brazier. Lysa then ran straight to the main hall and threw herself through the door, to her death. John was sad about it. Their marriage was not one of love, that is no doubt. But she was the mother of his heir. Now however, now he would need to sort out the entire situation. The Red Keep felt much emptier. Gone was the wailing of his late wife, gone was the annoying pontificating of the crown prince, gone was the boisterous laughter or anger of the king. Varys was still walking around, hands buried deep in his robes. Pycelle, still the blubbering fool, stumbled over his words. Littlefinger remained a pillar of confidence, using charisma. Renly seemed next to useless in his endeavors as the master of laws. Stannis had apparently left the capital, to return to his seat on Dragonstone. But enough of that now, he had letters to write. Robert I Baratheon, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. My son, I have awoken from my slumber. I understand you had become quite worrisome at my illness. Despite hearing from me, I beg you to listen to my words. I am unwell. I still am unaware at what caused my sickness, but I am still feeling it. My full strength has yet to return. I ask you, nay, I beg you, to continue to try and appoint Ned as your hand. He will be a good and trusted advisor. I shall remain in the capital until I fully recover. Unfortunately, I believe my days of running the realm are long past. Other problems have arisen as well. In her madness, my wife Lysa threw herself from the moon door in the Eyrie. Maester Coleman has become acting regent of the Vale, but he is not experienced enough to handle this. I am still too weak to travel home as of yet. As such, I ask that you endorse my letter I am sending to Ned's wife. I wish for her to serve as the regent of the Vale, while I appoint Yohn Royce to serve as the protector of the Vale. I wish for them to serve as co-regents until either I return to the Eyrie, or until Robin reaches his majority. I hope that the letter to Lady Catelyn arrives at the same time. I love you as my own son Robert, never forget that. You and Ned gave me many happy memories that I shall continue to cherish. I am so very sorry for stepping down, but for my own health, I must. Should you return with Ned, I shall most likely still be present, but I wholeheartedly endorse Ned's appointment. Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Lord Paramount and Defender of the Vale, Warden of the East. Lady Catelyn Stark, Lady of Winterfell. I apologize for writing directly to you, as I am sure you do not know me well. Unfortunately, I must share some saddening news with you. It is with great regret that I must inform you that your sister, Lysa, perished earlier this week. According to my maester and witnesses, she threw herself from the moon door in a fit of madness. I extend my shared sorrow at this news, and I wish you the best of condolences. I must apologize, and curse myself, as I must ask a great favor of you. Besides myself, you are the closest relative to my young son and heir, Robin Arryn. He is a gentle child, and admittedly a rather weak one. I am writing to Lord Yohn Royce, commanding him to serve as the protector of the Vale in my absence. However, I ask if you would be willing to serve as the regent of the Vale, to assist in the growth of my son into a worthy lordling. I am willing to allow any amount of ladies you wish to bring with you and support you in any way. I have written to the king, informing him that I have awoken, but am still far too weak to make the trip to the Eyrie as of yet. With the greatest condolences and 1,000 pardons. Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Lord Paramount and Defender of the Vale, Warden of the East. Lord Yohn Royce, Lord of Runestone. My old friend, it is with great euphoria that I write to you, that I have awoken from my sickness. Yet, the happiness ends there. As I am sure you are aware by now, my wife has perished, leaving my heir without any guardians present. Allow me to clear any confusion. I hereby appoint you as the protector of the Vale, with full military authority over the Vale, until my strength returns and I can make my way to the Eyrie once more. Fear not, I shall have ravens sent to all the lords of the Vale, informing them of the news. Be aware also, I have requested the Eddard Stark's wife, Lady Caitlin, serve as the regent of the Vale, empowered with full civil authority over my domain and governorship of my son. I hope that she accepts this responsibility. If she does, I expect you two to share in the responsibilities of the Vale. I shall enforce to her to respect your decisions relating to the Knights of the Vale, and the enforcement of mine or Lady Caitlin's decrees. I would be remiss not to expect the same of you two, however. I impress on you the duty to respect all of Lady Caitlin's decisions regarding her nephew and my son. I know that you shan't let me down, you never have. Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Lord Paramount and Defender of the Vale, Warden of the East. Jon nodded to himself, finding comfort in his decisions. He knew that appointing an outsider as the regent and protector of the Vale to be unsuitable to his bannermen. With his decision, he hoped that a compromise could be reached. The Royces of Runestone were among his most powerful vassals, and the only other lords who has been kings themselves before the coming of the Andals. With a Valyman as the protector, granted the military authority of the Vale, and a regent for his son, granted the civil authority of the Vale and governorship of his heir, it was his intention to create a balance of family and politics. He could only wish that this was sufficient. Now, on to other things. Jon knew Ned Stark enough to know that simply the allure of the power of the hand of the king was not enough to have him leave his home, he was too honorable for that. Mine eyes have been opened. Perhaps he became blind to the corruption and treachery around him. After all, if one spends enough time in a privy, they no longer smell the privy. Pycelle was more duplicitous than he realized. Varys was no doubt in the pockets of someone else, who, he knew not. Petter was an unknown. He was one of his own bannermen, but only a simpleton would take him as is. He needs to be watched as well. He wished, selfishly perhaps, that his strength did not return too fast, so that he would be able to see Ned one last time. Jon held no disillusions. He was an old man. His age was catching up to him. But he was glad to note that his mind had not left him. Perhaps his arms were no longer strong enough to wield a blade, and perhaps he would never wear his gleaming plate armor again, but his mind was still strong. By the gods, I'll die for I lose my mind to madness. Too bad the Flying Falcon was unaware of the tense moments in the Den of Wolves. Notes. And so the great game continues, and another player once again takes the field. Chapter 10, Minds Calmed and Hearts Stitched. Notes. * I hope everyone is having a great holiday week. ***, please read notes at end of chapter. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Catelyn Stark. Catelyn found herself in her husband's solar, together with Sir Barristan Selmy, the king, and Ned himself. The group was in the midst of discussing an entire plethora of information. Catelyn wanted to do nothing more than go to her chambers and sob into some furs. The news of her younger sister's death came to a blow to her. But her duty was to her husband at the moment, and he needed her right now. Jon Arryn had awoken from his deep sleep in the capital. When the king initially read the letter from his foster father, he had been delighted that the man had arisen. But his mood soon soured when Lord Arryn expressed his desire to resign regardless. That had also caused her misplaced joy. She wished for Ned to remain home, especially after Bran's fall, which he had still to awake from. But from Arryn's letter, along with the king, it seemed that the entire realm was doubling down on making her dear Ned the hand of the king. But this wasn't the end of it. Jon Arryn had wished that she, a woman he only met twice, to serve as one of his co-regents for his kingdom. She had never met her nephew, but overseeing his education was the least she could do for her late sister. Catelyn had felt what it was like to lose a family member for the first time in many decades. Her husband was unfortunately quite familiar with the feeling. Which was why he became far more resistant to going south. "Ned, I need you by my side. I'll agree to all your demands. Just join me. Please." The king had exclaimed. "I cannot, Robert. One of my sons is injured, my maester fears he may not walk again. I cannot leave my home now." They had been at this for hours. At this point, the king grunted loudly, swatted a goblet off of the table, and strode over to an open window. She thought that she'd have to speak to Ned quietly. "Ned. Your Grace." Let us take a moment for peace. Ned, may we speak for a moment? The king nodded in agreement, striding out of the room, no doubt seeking out some wine, with Sabaristan right on his heels. My lady. Ned, let us speak about the veil for the moment. Yes. Good idea. I think you should accept. Truly. By Jon's admission, he is fully awake now, has informed the Vale Lords, and will assume power once he is strong enough to make the return trip. Look at this less as a duty, and more as an extended visit. Of course, I worry too much. You may be right. If so, I'll join the king's party as they return to the capital and leave once we reach Riverrun. Good, and I shall remain here. Ned. No. He shouted, breaking his normally stoic character. I have lost enough of my family cat, I cannot bear to think what I shall do should I lose a child of mine. She embraced him, calming him. She knew for as much as he was a cold, northern lord, he also had many nights in which he awoke in a sweat. There was many a day where he'd be distant and excuse himself for hours as he'd visit his family's crypts. Ned. I know. I know what you feel so much. However, I fear for you. This decision to lock down the castle, to refuse the king's request, I fear you are beginning to grow scared of the shadows. Kat was unfamiliar with battle, but she was well aware of its aftermath. She had seen some of her family's household guards return from the rebellion. Some of them were never the same. Some would stare out into the distance for hours, some would cower at the sound of loud noises, there were some who even gave up the blade and shield for the rest of their lives. She remembered how one soldier returned. He walked through the courtyard and at the sound of some youngsters sparring in the tiltyard at Riverrun, became mad with paranoia. Her dear Ned was no different. She didn't know all of what he saw during the rebellion, but she knew much of had to be terrible. Sometimes he didn't sleep well along with other symptoms. She didn't blame him for wanting to stay with family, but not if it was because of irrational madness. Ned, still embraced, looked like a cornered animal, always looking and scanning, his body tense like a stalking predator. But at her words, he sighed, and deflated. His legs trembled slightly as he practically fell into a nearby chair. Oh Kat, perhaps you're right. Bran was going to fall eventually, correct? Yes, I fear so, Ned. I knew I should have mentioned it to him lately. Very well. Very well. I'll let Robert know that I shall accept his offer. However, I shall not depart for at least a month. Ned, she tiredly responded. Calm, my dear wife. It is because of Sansa, not just Bran. Oh. Yes, quite right. It is high time that I also face the reality of your ideas. That confused her. What in the name of the mother is he talking about? Initially, the royal family's presence dissuaded me. But I have come to realize the realm-wide situation. Sansa is one of 2 eligible daughters of Lords Paramount. The Riverlands does not have one, the Vale does not, the Stormlands have Shireen in effect, but due to her grayscale she shan't find any suitors anytime soon, sadly. That leaves the Reach and the North. What are you saying, Ned? I am saying that I am beginning to realize that Sansa may have to marry outside of the North. He smirked at her. Catelyn at first did not react. A smile slowly grew before she jumped into the arms of her husband. I knew you'd realize what a waste she'd be up here. But now on to who? My first thought was Willers Tyrell, he is the heir to the Reach and still unmarried as of yet. She had an idea. It was quite outside of the box for her, she surprised herself by thinking of it. What about the eldest son of the Prince of Dawn? Ned looked at her surprised. Oh, don't look at me like that. I may be a fanciful southern lady, but I am no simpleton either. A marriage could lessen the hatred that Dawn has for the North. Perhaps. If we were to pursue a Dornish marriage though, I'd prefer if we give Sansa's hand to young Edric Dane, the new Lord of Starfall after the death of his father. Why the Danes? Well, they are still Dornish, so the agreement would lessen their hatred for us. Secondly, if Sansa is to marry outside of the North, it would be best received if the family still recognized the old gods, the Blackwoods, the Royces, the Danes. I am sure there are others. Good point. She smiled up at him. You Northerners are quite defensive about your gods. She teased. But I do not want us to disregard the Tyrells yet. They are still a good option. Through them, we might be able to get a better deal for our trade for food. Eddard Stark. He watched as his wife continued to think. His eyes then widened when she came to the realization. Oh, I hope this isn't what I am thinking of. Ned. What about the Crown Prince? He needed to think quickly, so he became dismissive. Nay. That shan't happen. Cat eyed him dangerously. And why not? I know the king has always wanted to be related to you by blood. Well, that's just it, my lady. I fear Robert only had eyes for Lyanna. It felt wrong for him to use his sister in his reasoning, but he would not allow his Sansa to marry the prince. I fear that no other person would do. And secondly, the prince will most likely marry Margaery of House Tyrell. But if you serve as the king's hand, you will be better able to gain a marriage for Sansa. Perhaps, but as the hand, I would recommend to Robert to marry the Tyrells. Politically, we have nothing to offer. The North is already one of, if not the strongest, supporters of Robert, while on the other hand, marrying into the Tyrells accomplishes three things. First, it buys the loyalty of the second most powerful kingdom for at least 2, if not 3 generations. Second, it will reconcile Robert with the former Targaryen's main supporters. And lastly, it will prove competitive to the current power of the Lannisters. Catelyn was obviously annoyed at the use of such political arguments to argue with her about Sansa. But even she saw how beneficial it was to allow the Tyrells to marry, especially if Sansa was to marry the heir to Highgarden too. Perhaps, my lady wife, we can call upon Sansa now to discuss this with her. Yes, that is a good idea. I'll fetch her now. You give your answer to the king. He nodded in agreement. Leaving the small room, Cat made a left out of the door, while he turned right. He thought that the best place to find Robert was the hall, no doubt already putting down a couple goblets of wine or horns of ale. Perhaps I should have the castle locked down all the time. He thought amusingly to himself. I've never had an easier time walking through the keep than now. Reaching the hall, Robert was expectedly sitting at the high table, laughing with his Lord Commander about old stories. Your Grace. Whipping his head around to see him, Robert grinned. The frustration of the talks having already left him. One of the better qualities to Robert. He was quick to rise and anger, sure. But he was as equally quick to calm and laugh. It helped with building diplomacy, no doubt. Ned. Join me at your table. Your Grace, I have reached a decision. Robert became somber, almost as if he were worried about what he'd say. Robert, I have agreed to serve as your hand. Before he could continue, he was cut off. Ah. I knew it. I knew you'd join me. Barristan, you can join Ned in his dull attitude. But, I have an additional demand. Oh hells, what now? I shall serve as your hand, however, I request an additional month before I depart Winterfell. With Catelyn leaving for the Vale with your party, my children will need one of their parents, at least for a short while, to settle in. I must also be here for Bran at the moment. Very well, that's easy enough. Perhaps Jon can serve a light schedule as acting hand until you return. Thank you, Robert, truly. Remember my other conditions though. If I see one Lannister man at arms when I reach the capital, I am turning my party around and heading north once more without a second thought. Yes. You've been quite insistent. Come, let's relive our childhood one more time, Sir Barristan. Grab that horn and pass it to Lord Stark. We've a drinking competition to have. Though drinking once more with Robert reminded him of the Vale, he had to excuse himself to return to his wife and daughter after a horn and a half. He returned to the same room that the others had their previous discussion in. Both Catelyn and Sansa were already present. Father. My lord. Cat, Sansa, let us speak. It appeared, however, that Sansa wouldn't let him start. Father, may I speak clearly? Of course, child. He took a seat next to his wife. I know you and mother, and my brothers and sisters think me high in the air about southern customs and chivalry and lofty ideals. But may I remind you that I am as equally smart as Edwyle. Sansa was shocking them, she had never spoken to them live this. It wasn't anger, but it was almost sadness. Sadness as perhaps them thinking she knew nothing. Sansa, dear. We know you are so intelligent. Catelyn tried to embrace her to calm her. No. Please, just listen. A worried Catelyn sat back down. Mother, father, I am not ignorant of the North. I know the history and family of every single vassal of ours. I know their words, I know their seat, I know their relationship with House Stark. I am not foolish. By her tone, Ned soon guessed her mother had not yet spoken to her about southern matches yet. But he'll allow her to vent, that's what she needed now. Which is what comes to my conclusion. The next words out of her mouth made Eddard Stark freeze in his seat, and have a growing anger in his heart. I must marry Lord Bolton. Both him and his wife sat in shock. It took all his will not to stand and strike his dear eldest daughter. If only she knew of Roose Bolton's other son. Cat broke the silence first. Absolutely not. He is many winters your senior. I will not have my daughter married to an already old man. A barbarian at that. Sansa Stark, I will overlook that point this one time. But no more. Please. Just listen to me for a few moments. He and Cat looked at each other, but Sansa started regardless. Marrying to any other house in the north doesn't make sense. The Umbers and the Karstarks are already loyal enough. The Marndale is too. House Ryswell and Dustin will not be made more loyal simply from my marriage. Ned tried to keep his anger in check. And so why the Boltons? Lord Bolton recently lost his only heir. That leaves him the last of his house. I am aware of the history of our families. Please try not to take this as a lecturing tone, but the Boltons were never a threat from their host. Now, both him and Cat were confused. How do you mean? House Bolton, though a respectable-sized army, is not the reason for their danger, neither for their financial power or marriage pacts. House Bolton has been a threat to House Stark simply by their presence. They were the last kings to be absorbed and have rebelled many a time in centuries past. That is it, father, it's their mere presence. And, in addition, we have a unique position here. By marrying Lord Bolton, I shall bring them into the fold. No future lord of the Dread Fort, raised by me most especially, will ever wish to rise against their cousins. We will bring in one of the most powerful bannermen we have, and secure its loyalty for at least 3 generations, especially if in the future, I can foster perhaps a child from Robb or Edwyle. Cat moved to speak once more in opposition. Before she could, however, he spoke. Catelyn. Please give me and Sansa a moment of peace. His wife looked to argue, but one look at his face told her he was not in the mood to discuss further. He waited until his wife left the room, closing the door behind her. Sansa sat in silence. He moved to speak but decided that he should calm himself first. Standing up, he moved over to an open window to get some fresh air. Sansa. Listen to me and listen well. Father. Sansa Stark. Sansa recoiled at his snap. He never tried to yell at his children, but this was not a normal time. Sansa, listen, do not speak. She nodded, eyes downcast. I would like to first apologize at snapping at you, my child. I am sorry, forgive me. In my anger, I wished it were different, but you reminded me today how intelligent you truly are. Every single reason to mentioned was a good one, a thoughtful one. Sansa looked back up, a cautionary smile coming to her face. Thank you, father. She softly said. But Sansa, there is something you are unaware of. In my love for you, I sought to hide you from all the ugliness in the world. I failed Robb and Edwyle some years ago, and I wish not to fail you, but it seems I must. What do you mean, father? Sansa, Roose Bolton did not have only one son. He sired a bastard named Ramsay Snow. I've heard vicious rumors. If so, why have not you done anything? Sansa asked, genuinely curious. Because though I have the right, it would anger the Boltons, and upset a great number of other lords, if I were to unilaterally enter the Boltons' territory to carry out justice based only on rumor. But don't the other lords find the Boltons distasteful as well? But many would see it as a curb on themselves too. After all, if House Stark cares not for entering the lands of their greatest rivals, then what's to stop us from doing it to those who are closer to us? I hadn't thought of that. Sansa was upset, not doubt frustrated that she did not think of everything in her preparation for this. Nay, but then again, you made many good points that I hadn't thought of. You truly are amongst the smartest of my children, he said, not unkindly, and not pointedly at his other posterity. They shared a moment of silence, but not because they had nothing to say. Both he and Sansa seemed to need a moment to themselves, thinking over all the points that each other made. But enough about the North, let's consider other options. Sansa, dear one. If you were to marry outside the North, your mother and I have narrowed our options down to Quentyn Martell, eldest son of Prince Doran Martell, Edric Dane, the Lord of Starfall, and Willers Tyrell, the heir to Highgarden. Why two Dornishmen? Once again, Sansa proved her smarts as she quickly analyzed all the options. Considering the Vale, Robin Arryn is far too young for you. Perhaps the eldest of Lord Royce, but the Vale faces many of the problems that you face with most of the North. We already have very good connections with the kingdom, so we wouldn't gain much. The same goes for the Riverlands. What about the Westerlands or the Crown Lands? Ned immediately made a frown. I shall lie dead in the cold, hard ground, for I see a child of mine married to the Lions or their ilk. Sansa seemed to realize she was walking on very thin ice at the moment, so she elected to move on without questioning. And the Stormlands? Same with the Riverlands and the Vale. There could be a point to be made for either Stannis or Renly, with Stannis' late wife birthing their only living child before passing on. However, I would not think to sentence you to the dreary place of Dragonstone. And Renly, father. It took all his control not to blush. Speaking with Robert made him aware of Renly's nighttime habits. He knew of many lords who would consider it a great sin. Ned truly did not mind on a man's preferences in the bedchambers. But a marriage was more political than for love, and a childless marriage was as useful as an unsharpened sword. Renly, I fear Renly would not agree with you. He is much too. Yes. Think about it this way. I think if you'd marry Renly you would soon find out that he would be unfulfilling to you. As if you took a bite of an apple pastry, only to find no apples within. Sansa, perhaps too young fully understand the connections with people, just nodded in confusion. Which leaves either Dorne or the Reach. Sansa leaned back in her chair and sat in momentary thoughtfulness. By the way her eyes moved about, it was apparent she was thinking of the options. She leaned forward and put her hands in her lap, crossed. If I was to marry into Dorne, it should be of House Dane. Some members still follow the old gods, which will come to placate the northern lords. All my children seem to be smarter than I shall ever be. Which narrows it down to either the Danes, or the Tyrells. The north will be more receptive of the Danes, but we would gain much more with the Tyrells. He stood up from his chair. His movement broke Sansa from her trance of meditation. She stood up to face her father. He pulled her into a hug, resting one hand on the back of her head. You make me proud every day, Sansa. I am glad you put as much thought into this, or more, as your mother and I did. Thank you, father. I hoped one of you would see my worth eventually. Oh stupid girl. You should know that I have always seen the greatness in you. And your decision. Oh, we have a month to decide. Let us think on it. Yes, father, good idea. We can discuss it with the family. He chuckled. That we shall. Come, let us speak with your mother. Notes. So I have been informed that despite Sansa's very southern viewpoint in Asoyaf, apparently she was still quite intelligent, even from the beginning. Both my personal Asoyaf scholar has informed me of that, as well as some others who have demed me. I hope to capture her natural intelligence in this chapter and do her justice. So, Roose Bolton, I know, so gross. But think of this as if it were medieval ages, as this is set in that theme. Disregarding age, as most of the time it was, let me know what you think of the possibility. DM me or leave a review. This is only for /against Bolton marriage. If you all decide against it, I am already aware of who she would marry in the south. Please let me know. Chapter 11, Scrimmage of Doves and Men. Notes. I wished to update this story much sooner than now. Unfortunately, over the holidays, I suffered an injury that required a hospital visit and I have been recovering ever since. I apologize for the delay and hope to get back to a better schedule. Chapter text 298 AC. Robb Stark. His father had summoned him, Edwyl, and his mother into his solar. When he had arrived with his brother, his sister Sansa was already present as well. Entering through the door, Robb walked over to lean against one of the walls while Edwyl elected to stand with his hands behind his back. Their mother had yet to make her appearance. "Boys. Are you well?" "Aye, father. We were staying with Bran," Edwyl solemnly commented. Robb's father's attempt at small talk was washed away like ice from a warm summer rain at the mention of young Brandon. Robb moved to speak just as his mother walked into the chambers. Gone was her smile when she laid her eyes on her children. Since Brandon fell, his mother has had a permanent scowl or frown upon her fair face. "My love, children." His father leaned back in his chair and held out his arm for his mother. Walking from the entrance of the solar to his arms, they embraced before his lady mother leaned on his shoulder. "Children, we are here to discuss the avenues of Sansa's marriage prospects. Currently, we have 3 viable options. The first of which is Willers Tyrell, the heir to Highgarden, and the Reach. I heard he suffered a leg injury, although I am unaware in the ways of medicine as the Maesters are. Does his injury prevent him from, sewing?" Robb interjected. "Robb, let father speak, then we can discuss." Sansa ordered him, far more serious than she usually did. "Our second option is Edric of the House Dane, Lord of Starfall." "And the last?" Robb questioned. His father remained silent. Sansa shot him a curious look before she took the lead in the discussion. "My last option is Lord Roose Bolton." And then the 7 hells opened up. What? What is the meaning of this? What happened to the Martells?" his mother shouted, looking at his lord father expectantly. "He's 30 winters older than you. What in the blazes are you thinking?" he himself shouted. The only one who remained quiet was Edwyl, yet even he had a surprised look on his face. In some moments, his father managed to calm down his mother and then stood, slamming his chair into the wall behind him. He did not raise his voice, however, his father rarely did. "There will be peace in this chamber, or so help me I shall have all of you sweep the snows off the walls for the next 3 winters. He once more took his seat and, clasping his hands together, spoke. "Let's take this one at a time. First, the Tyrells. The best marriage I can see. Tie ourselves to one of the richest houses, as well as probably have some better trade deals for winter," his mother commented. "The king will like it too. He's too angry to marry one of his children to them, but he needs them loyal. What better way than to marry into his best friend and closest ally's family?" Robb also agreed. His father nodded but grimaced. Aye, you are both right, but I sense that marrying into that family would cost us more than we might realize. The Queen of Thorns is a dangerous woman and I hold no disillusions that she would include Sansa in her games." "What about Lord Edric?" Sansa asked. "Well, for one, you are of the same age, which would help with any awkward situations. It would also tie us to a very powerful vassal House of Dorne, though I have yet to see why we gave up the Martells." His mother pointedly spoke to her husband. "Not to mention it may help with repairing some of the bad blood between Dorne and the North. While not the Martells themselves, the Danes are amongst one of their more powerful vassals. Of the 2 southern marriages, Lord Edric would be better received by the northern lords." It wasn't exactly an answer his father provided, but it kept the discussion moving. Once he spoke, the room was silent. It appeared that no one wanted to broach the subject. It seemed his mother grew tired and spoke first. "Sansa, I cannot begin to describe how disappointed I am in your belief that Roose Bolton is a good match. That is the understatement of the century. Sister, Lord Bolton is over 3 decades older than you. He is an odd man as well." He elected not to go into the Boltons' history. It seemed no one wanted to mention it. Sansa opened her mouth multiple times throughout. Finally she spoke once he finished. I know. But just listen. House Bolton is amongst our most powerful vassals. As I have explained to father, House Bolton is not dangerous because of their acts. I am fully aware of the history between our two families. Since she spoke with an urgency, as if she was attempting to speak all she wanted to speak, expecting someone to interrupt her. Seeing that they were all paying her the attention she asked for, she continued, calmer. House Bolton is dangerous not from their army or their lord himself, but from the mere presence of them. What do you mean by that? Rob coaxed out. Sansa sighed, like she was trying to teach the simplest concept to a babe, but the babe didn't understand. The greatest threat to us from the Boltons is the mere symbolism of them. The Boltons are the last house to have challenged ours, and people still remember it. If I were to marry into the house, it would finally bring them into the fold. No child raised by me would seek to usurp their cousins. We could negate their greatest advantage over us. Sansa looked to father, at which point they both nodded softly. Curious, wonder what that's about. Just as the sun rises, so too does it set. A voice softly spoke. Sansa's, his parents, and his attention snapped behind him, to where Edwyle was still standing quietly. Damn, I nearly forgot he was here. What does that mean, Ed? Clearing his throat, he spoke directly to Sansa, not to father or mother. You see the best in your idea. I admire that, truly. Sansa, you have impressed me today, only over a decade old, and you have given in-depth thought about all these options, but as for the Boltons, I believe you may be skewed. He walked further into the solar, making his presence larger. You believe that a child between you and him would not seek, and therefore not be a threat, to our house. But have you ever given the thought that perhaps he would be one step ahead? You'd give him a son and suddenly you'd pass away in an accident. It was amazing watching his brother. This must have felt like for those older to be speaking to his lord father when he was younger. Edwyle was fast embracing the title of the Quiet Wolf as well. Speaking only when needed to, but with great wisdom. Sansa, I am so proud of the research and thought into this, but, I have no doubt should you marry into House Bolton, one way or another, within 3 generations, I wholeheartedly believe that a Bolton will be sitting in the Great Hall of Winterfell, rather than a Stark. Sansa hung her head. Why would she be upset about the growing resistance to Roose Bolton? Then realized, it wasn't the Bolton himself, it was herself. She hadn't thought of all the possibilities. Walking further, Edwyle placed one of his hands on her shoulders. You should be proud of yourself, Sansa. I think I speak for all of us that you made some great points. Points that, in our opposition to such a match, we'd never have thought of. Edwyle got down on one knee and held Sansa's hands. But if you were to marry Lord Bolton, I believe you'd be signing the death warrant for all of us. Rob could hear her sniffling. I just thought that I could bring peace to our last greatest rival. I would also be closer to family. Hey, I know. I know. Fear not, sister, you have proven yourself to all of us, let it not be said differently. He stood back up and looked around the room. I think we can safely say that a marriage to House Bolton is off the table. None in the room spoke against it. Sir Barristan Selmy. He enjoyed the north. It seemed his charge did as well. He hadn't seen Robert Baratheon in a better mood since he took the throne. The king would not stop speaking about how great it was. It was good, he'd never deny it, but he missed his own home, the Stormlands. It did help that the north was filled with Starker people. No pun intended. The people were more direct, blunt. But they were also fiercer, more deadly. To this day, he could count on one hand the people who gave his swordsmanship a run for its gold dragon. Sir Arthur Dayne was one. He supposed he should add Sir Jaime to the list as well, much to his annoyance, and Sir Brynden Blackfish Tully. The other, was Lord Eddard Stark. He had faced the man on the trident, and the way he swung his sword ice was something to be commended. He remembered that day like it was just yesterday. He supposed that he would for the rest of his life. He was already in the middle of his life at the trident, gone were the youthful dreams of grandeur and stupidity. Yet even he thought that the young Lord of Winterfell would have been easy prey. A blade like ice is not an average blade. Sure, it was Valyrian steel, making it lighter, but it was still a great sword. Believe the Northerners call them claymores. Regardless, a great sword is not an easy weapon to learn. Many think of it as similar to an arming sword, but this was far from the case. The length and weight of a great sword made it so most wielders wielded them like war hammers. Smashing and sweeping in great arcs with great strength, fearsome, aye, but relatively easy to counter if one knew how. He made that mistake that day. Eddard Stark wielded ice as if it were nothing more than a practice sword. True, he used great sweeping maneuvers and attempted to hammer him back, but Lord Stark also slashed, pierced, lunged, and blocked with his sword of his with great skill. And yet, he never once heard the Quiet Wolf boast of his skills. Nor did anyone hear of it. It was through his advice to the king that spared him and allowed a maester to see to his wounds. He would never, ever admit this to the new king he swore to, but he still thought about the rebellion, the causes, outcomes. He was bitter still about a great number of things but couldn't deny the reason for it. He hated Tywin Lannister. He supposed he was not the only one. Tywin had been insulted by Aerys too, no doubt, but to order the deaths of the princess and her children, unforgivable. He thought Hoster Tully lived up to his house's sigil very well. A fish looking for advantages where they could be found, always ambitious, yet never fully reaching his potential. Jon Arryn had been in a bad position. He wouldn't deny that, yet he was sure things could have been handled differently. Barristan cursed that Stannis was not the eldest, instead of Robert. Robert was a great warrior, but a terrible king. But Eddard Stark. He was perhaps the only one Barristan did not have an ounce of a grudge against. He was there that day. That terrible day. It was beyond stupid for Brandon Stark to demand of things to Aerys like that. But it was honorable for Lord Rakhard to demand a trial by combat. And it would sicken him to this day, watching how that sacred right was perverted by a madman. Of all the leaders of the rebellion, it was Eddard Stark he held no blame for. Chapter 12, The Wandering Trout Leaves the Growing Pack. Notes. ** Please read the notes at the end. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Catelyn Stark. When she left Winterfell the fortnight ago, she did it with great sadness. Never in her youth could she have imagined that. Brandon Stark was so handsome, and boisterous too. The news of his murder left her saddened and morose. The news of the transfer of her betrothal agreement to Brandon's younger brother did not help lift her spirits. Though she was not foolish enough to trick herself into believing he was unworthy, as what are spares for anyway, she had heard of the Quiet Wolf. Oh yes, I had heard. In those days, before the Smiles died and the realm fell into chaos, the Quiet Wolf was a unique, but entirely uninteresting piece of news. Quiet, as no doubt his moniker suggested, subservient, more of a follower than a leader. Though she didn't doubt his strength in arms, before they had met, she had not yet seen whether or not his spine was as strong as his arm. When Eddard Stark rode through the gates of Riverrun, alongside of Jon Arryn and much of their close lords, her suspicions were laid to rest, lightly. He was unassuming, that much was true. Eddard Stark clothed himself not in fine, colorful silks, adorned with gems and metals. He wore a simple doublet, black, unadorned. He wore a castle-forged gorget round his neck and upper torso with the emblem of a wolf prancing along. Over, he bore an overcoat of wolf fur. At his right hip was a small dagger and his left hip, an arming sword. Upon his back was strapped the biggest sword she had ever seen in her life. To this day, that sword makes me feel uneasy. Their wedding night and later coupling had been awkward for the both of them. Eddard Stark rode out of Riverrun's gate at the break of dawn the next morn. But then she birthed their son. Robb had been the first thing the young couple could share their love and interest in. They had grown into friends after Robb. Love came later, first with Edwyle, then Sansa, then the rest. She realized then that she had not been saddened for leaving Winterfell but leaving all the memories that helped make it home. Soon I shall be back within those great halls. But that had been many, many days ago. She left the party of Robert Baratheon just north of Daery to turn eastward, towards the mountains of the Vale. There she found herself for the great gates of the east. The Bloody Gate was a misnomer she realized. The fortification itself was not particularly awe-inspiring, but on the western side of the gate, the ground was marred and scarred. She supposed that thousands of years of history could be lost from books perhaps, but not the earth. The tears and scars in the earth from projectiles and relic pieces of broken armor and blades adorned the field. Halt! In the name of Lord Jonarin, the defender of the Vale, who would pass the bloody gate. A voice called down from the ramparts. Though she had half a dozen Winterfell honor guards with her, she herself responded. I am Lady Catelyn Stark. I have been requested by Lord Jonarin to travel to the Eyrie, to serve as his regent until he may yet return. Cat. That wasn't the response she had expected. But very quickly, the gate opened, and a guard appeared, waving their party through. Her and her few guards trotted through, and on the other side stood a man in black. He had very slightly wavy hair down just above his shoulders. And upon his chest, emblazoned, was a black trout. Uncle. Unhorsing herself, she swung down and landed in an inelegant manner. Before she could brush the creases out of her cloak, she was wrapped up in a tight embrace. Cat. It is good to see you. It has been too long. She was finally able to see her uncle, the Blackfish, in his entirety. Gone was his grin. He never did smile much. But there was still mirth in his eyes. Hello, uncle. It is wonderful to see you. Before I forget. She reached into her small pouch neath her cloak and pulled out a scroll, the very same that Jonarin had sent to her. Here is the letter. Oh, piss on that, I believe you. His resistance at reading the scroll warmed her heart. Her father and uncle never got along. And even though he may not wish to marry someone else, he still took their house's words to heart. By now, her guards were feeding their horses. Cat, I shall send additional men for you. Oh, that won't be necessary. She assumed it was his noble character. But she felt his grip on her arm tighten. Nay. Listen to me, Cat. The north is wild, but so too is the Vale. I shan't have my only niece travel the high road, crawling with the mountain clans with naught but enough guards to take a dozen eggs to break their fast. I shall organize a party of 50 riders for you. He finally dropped the serious tone and took a lighter one. After all, you're to be our regent after all. Wouldn't have you do riding about with only a handful of guards. Many thanks, uncle. Do you know if Lord Royce has reached the Eyrie yet? We are to be co-regents. I received a raven from Lord Arryn about his preparations. Assuming Lord Royce left Runestone the day after I received the raven, he should have been there by now. However, I haven't received a raven from him yet. Unneeded perhaps, but a show of etiquette. One that Yohn Royce would certainly recognize. No, I believe he has not reached the Eyrie yet, but he was never the slowest man either. I'd suspect that he will arrive sooner than you are though. Thank you, uncle. Could my party rest here for the night? Get a fresh start on the morrow? Of course. It was remiss of me not to offer sooner. He turned to a guard and ordered him to relieve the Stark's guards' horses and find them a meal and quarters. And you young later shall dine with me tonight. Robb Stark. He was sitting with his father and brother, reviewing lordly lessons and last pieces of advice when the door to his father's solo was banged on roughly. Lord Stark. Enter. As soon as the words left his father's mouth, a guard entered the chambers. But instead of seeking his father, the guard's eyes met his. Lord Robb, Lady Dacey has gone into her labor pains. Standing up so fast he got dizzy, he approached the guard. Where is she? Fear not me, lord, she was brought to the Maester's chambers where he is looking over her now. Without seeking permission from his father, Robb ran out of the room, grey wind bounding after him. Running through the corridors of the castle, he blew past servants, guardsmen, and others. Running down a side hallway, he was going so fast he actually slammed into the wall at the end, too fast to slow down going around the corner. Picking himself up, he once again sprinted to the Maester's chambers. Even if he had been unfamiliar with the castle, the yelling was a surefire way to find it. Whipping into the room, he came across his wife laying on a bed. Her forehead was being patted by a damp cloth by a midwife as Maester Lewyn was rushing around the room, organizing potions and tools and any other potentially useful items. Lord Robb. How is she, Lewyn? Lewyn's face changed to one of mild surprise. Very unlike your mother, Robb. While your mother's labor lasted for near a day, Lady Dacey's contractions have picked up at a very intense pace. Unusual for first-time mothers to go this quickly once the baby's on the way. By now, both Edwyle and his father had reached the chambers. Lewyn turned his attention to his father. My lord, I'll require additional midwives and a wet nurse to be prepared. While Eddard Stark may have been the Lord of Winterfell, when a babe was being born, Maester Lewin was giving the orders. I'll see it done. His father left immediately, going to track down whatever need personnel was required. Lewin turned to him. Robb, I know this is a very excitable time right now, but I shall require you to remain outside. I will not compromise the health of either the babe or the mother because I am distracted. He said nothing more but motioned for the open door. He was hesitant to leave, but after looking at Daisy, she just gave a small nod and a smaller smile. Very well, Maester. Help my wife. I have not allowed your lady mother to lose a child. I shan't start now. Come one, Robb, let us pray in the wood. The evermore